Greetings, dear viewers. You're watching H. Potter. We have prepared something special for you today. Abandoned by Dumbledore at age 5, Harry Potter was raised by goblins and became their war king. Your likes and subscriptions keep this channel alive. If you enjoy our content, please show your support. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Chapter 1, The Abandoned Child. 5-year-old Harry Potter couldn't stop shivering. The November air bit through his thin jacket as the tall man with the long silver beard led him through twisting London streets. Harry's small hand was completely swallowed by the old man's bony fingers. They'd been walking forever, at least it felt that way to Harry's tired legs. Just a bit further, my boy, Dumbledore said, not looking down. Harry nodded even though the man wasn't watching. He'd learned not to ask questions after living with Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. The strange man had appeared at Privet Drive that morning, speaking in hushed tones with his relatives before they'd packed Harry's few belongings in a small bag and practically shoved him out the door. "Are we going somewhere nice?" Harry finally whispered, his breath making little clouds in the cold air. Dumbledore's steps faltered for just a moment. "You're going somewhere necessary, Harry. For the greater good." They turned down a narrow street lined with odd shops Harry had never seen before, places selling cauldrons, robes, and things that looked like they belonged in Halloween displays. People in strange clothes stared as they passed. Harry thought he heard someone whisper, "Potter boy," but that couldn't be right. Eventually, they stopped in front of a massive white building that towered over everything else on the street. Harry gaped at the burnished bronze doors and the short, fierce-looking creature standing guard. "This is Gringotts Bank," Dumbledore explained, his voice suddenly formal. "The Ministry will find you here. Remember, Harry, sometimes sacrifices must be made in war, even after the fighting ends." Harry frowned up at him, not understanding. "But the war's over. Aunt Petunia said my parents died in the war." Dumbledore wouldn't meet his eyes. Instead, he pressed something cold and metallic into Harry's palm, a small key. "Your inheritance key. Keep it hidden." He straightened up, adjusting his purple robes. "Wait by the steps. Someone will come for you shortly." "You're leaving?" Harry's voice cracked. "But I don't know anyone here." "I'm sorry, my boy. Truly. The prophecy was quite clear. You must be removed from our world before." Dumbledore shook his head. "The goblins will ensure you're properly placed." Before Harry could say another word, Dumbledore turned and walked away, his tall figure quickly swallowed by the crowd. Harry stood frozen, clutching his small bag and the mysterious key, watching the only link to this strange new world abandon him. Fat tears rolled down his cheeks as he climbed the stone steps and slumped against a column, trying to make himself as small as possible. The short guard at the door glared at him but didn't approach. Hours passed. The stream of oddly dressed people entering and exiting the bank thinned as evening approached. Harry's stomach growled. His fingers and toes had gone numb. Nobody came for him. The guard was replaced by another equally intimidating short figure, who studied Harry with narrowed eyes. "Boy," the guard finally called. "Bank's closing. You can't sleep here." Harry looked up, his face streaked with dried tears. "I'm waiting for someone from the Ministry. The man with the silver beard said they'd come." The guard's eyes widened slightly. He stepped closer, examining Harry's forehead where his unruly hair had parted to reveal his lightning-shaped scar. "Gornek," the guard barked over his shoulder. "Get Razorclaw. Now." Minutes later, Harry found himself surrounded by 3 of the strange short creatures, all staring at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. "I am Razorclaw, head of security," said the tallest of them, his voice like gravel. "What's your name, wizard child?" Harry Potter," he replied, shrinking back. The creatures exchanged rapid glances. "The Harry Potter," one whispered. "The one who destroyed the Dark Lord." "Impossible," hissed another. The boy lives with powerful wizards under magical protection. Razorclaw crouched to Harry's level, his dark eyes glittering in the fading light. Who left you here, boy? A man with a long silver beard. Dumble something. Dumbledore? Razorclaw's face contorted. And he said someone from the ministry would retrieve you? Harry nodded miserably. Razorclaw stood abruptly. Gornick, check the perimeter for ministry officials or order members. He sniffed the air. No wizard would abandon their precious savior unless something's very wrong. While Gornick disappeared, Razorclaw studied Harry. Show me what you carry. Harry hesitantly offered his bag and, after a moment's hesitation, the small golden key. Razorclaw's eyes widened at the key. He snatched it, holding it up to the light. A Potter vault key. So he leaves you with your inheritance but abandons you to the elements? He made a disgusted noise deep in his throat. Gornick returned, breathing heavily. No wizards watching the bank. I've consulted with Director Ragnarok. The ministry has issued no child retrieval orders today. So the great Albus Dumbledore dumps their hero on our doorstep and walks away, Razorclaw growled. Typical wizard arrogance. What should we do with him? Asked the third goblin, eyeing Harry suspiciously. Razorclaw's mouth twisted into something between a grimace and a smile. Take him inside. Director Ragnarok will want to see this for himself. Harry found himself guided through the bronze doors, then through a second set of silver doors covered in strange writing. Inside was a vast marble hall with long counters stretching along either side, staffed by dozens more of the creatures, goblins, Harry had heard them call themselves. Most of the counters were empty now, the workday ending. At the far end of the hall stood a raised platform where an ancient-looking goblin with spectacles balanced on his long nose was examining a ledger. Director Ragnarok, Razorclaw called, his voice echoing in the nearly empty hall. We have a situation. Ragnarok looked up, his expression souring when he spotted Harry. Why is there a wizard child in my bank after hours, Razorclaw? Not just any wizard child. This is Harry Potter. Ragnarok's bushy eyebrows shot up. He set down his quill and peered at Harry over his spectacles. Approach, boy. Harry shuffled forward, acutely aware of how filthy and small he looked in this magnificent space. Show him, Razorclaw ordered. Harry hesitantly pushed his hair back, revealing his scar. Ragnarok's eyes narrowed. And how did Harry Potter come to be abandoned on our doorstep? Dumbledore, Razorclaw spat the name. Left him with a vault key and a vague promise that the ministry would collect him. And you verified? No ministry officials, no retrieval orders, no wizard watching the bank. Ragnarok's long fingers drummed on the desk. Most curious. What game is Dumbledore playing? The Potter boy is meant to be under powerful protection. Harry gathered his courage. Please, sir. I don't think he's coming back. He said something about a prophecy and that I needed to be removed from their world. The bank director went very still. Those exact words. Removed from their world. Harry nodded. Ragnarok and Razorclaw exchanged a long look that Harry couldn't interpret. Take him below, Ragnarok finally said. The secure guest quarters. Post a guard. I'll consult the elders about this. Development. Below. With our kind. Gornick protested. Director, he's a wizard. And not just any wizard, he's Potter. Precisely why we can't turn him out or hand him to the ministry without understanding Dumbledore's game, Ragnarok snapped. The boy represents power, opportunity, and possibly danger. We'll decide his fate properly, not hastily. Razorclaw nodded and gripped Harry's shoulder. Come, boy. You'll stay with us tonight. Harry found himself led through a small door behind the counters and onto a narrow stone platform where a strange cart sat on metal tracks. Before he could ask questions, he was thrust into the cart, and they were hurtling down into darkness at a speed that made his stomach lurch. The cart twisted and turned through a labyrinth of tunnels, plunging deeper into the earth. Harry caught glimpses of massive caverns, strange creatures darting in shadowy corners, and what looked like rivers of molten gold. Finally, they screeched to a halt on a platform carved directly from dark stone. "This way," Razorclaw said, not waiting to see if Harry followed. They walked through tunnels lit by glowing crystals embedded in the walls. Harry noticed they were passing many goblins now, some carrying stacks of parchment, others pushing carts of gleaming objects, all stopping to stare as the human child passed. "Where are we going?" Harry finally asked. "To the lower levels where our kind live," Razorclaw replied without turning around. "No wizard has been here in 3 centuries. Consider yourself privileged." After passing through a massive iron gate guarded by armored goblins, they entered what could only be described as an underground city. Harry gaped at the stone buildings carved directly from the cavern walls, the network of bridges spanning deep chasms, and the bustling marketplace filled with goblins trading goods Harry had never seen before. "This is Deephold," Razorclaw explained, his voice softening slightly at Harry's obvious wonder. "One of 7 goblin cities beneath London." They continued through winding streets, climbing several levels until they reached a small building set apart from the others. Inside was a simple room with a stone bed covered in furs, a small table, and a basin of water. "You'll stay here tonight. Food will come shortly. Don't leave this room." Razorclaw turned to go, then paused. "The director called you an opportunity, boy. I'm not convinced. Prove me wrong." With that cryptic statement, he left, the heavy door swinging shut behind him. Alone in the strange room, Harry finally let himself collapse onto the fur-covered bed. He was exhausted, confused, and terrified, but also, strangely, more interested in his surroundings than scared. Anything was better than the Dursley's cupboard. He pulled out his few possessions, some oversized clothes, a broken toy soldier he'd salvaged from Dudley's trash, and a small photo his aunt had reluctantly given him of his parents. As he looked at their smiling faces, a new emotion bubbled up inside him. Anger. The silver-bearded man, Dumbledore, had known his parents. Had spoken about them like he cared. Then left Harry alone on cold steps with strange creatures. "I don't need him anyway," Harry whispered fiercely to the photo. "I'll be fine on my own. I always am." He didn't know it then, but that moment of defiance marked the first step in his transformation from abandoned wizard child to something the magical world had never seen before. Harry woke to a sharp prod in his ribs. He bolted upright, reaching instinctively for his glasses, which had fallen off during sleep. "Up, wizard child," commanded a young goblin not much taller than Harry himself. "Director wants you." Harry scrambled to his feet, noticing a tray of food he'd been too tired to eat the previous night. His stomach growled loudly. "Eat quickly," the goblin ordered, looking disgusted at having to wait. 5 minutes. Harry wolfed down the strange food, some kind of meat pastry and a bitter tea, while the goblin tapped his foot impatiently. When he finished, he was led back through the winding streets of Deephold, drawing even more stares than the previous evening. This time, they entered a grand hall carved from black stone, its ceiling supported by columns shaped like warriors. At the far end sat Ragnarok behind a massive desk, surrounded by older goblins in elaborate robes. Razorclaw stood to one side, his expression unreadable. "Approach, Harry Potter," Ragnarok called. Harry walked forward, feeling tiny under the gaze of so many unfriendly eyes. "We've discussed your situation," Ragnarok began without preamble. "Consulted our seers, examined the omens. Your appearance here is no accident." "But Dumbledore," Harry started. "Played into something larger than himself," Ragnarok interrupted. "Whether he knows it or not." One of the elder goblins stepped forward. "For centuries, our prophets have spoken of an outsider who would bridge our worlds. A warrior with feet in 2 realms. We believed it myth, until now." Harry frowned. "I'm just Harry. Several goblins laughed, harsh, barking sounds. Just Harry who survived the killing curse, Razorclaw said. Just Harry who Dumbledore himself feared enough to abandon. I tested your blood while you slept, said another elder, holding up a small vial of red liquid. Powerful magic flows through you, child. Not just wizard magic, something older. Harry felt uncomfortable at the revelation they'd taken his blood while he slept but was too intimidated to protest. Ragnarok leaned forward. We face a choice, Harry Potter. By goblin law, we could return you to the wizards. Or we could, keep you. Keep me? Like, adopt me? Nothing so sentimental, Ragnarok said with a dismissive wave. You would be a ward of the nation. Trained in our ways. Taught our magic alongside your own. In return, when you come of age, you would serve Gringotts and the Goblin Nation. As what? Harry asked. As whatever we need, Razorclaw answered bluntly. A bridge to the wizards. A warrior when necessary. A symbol. Harry considered this. He remembered Privet Drive, the cupboard, the hunger, the loneliness. He remembered Dumbledore's cold dismissal. Then he looked around at the grand hall, the strange magic he could feel pulsing through the stone, the fierce pride in every goblin face. If I stay, would I learn magic? Real magic? Both kinds, Ragnarok confirmed. Wizard and goblin. No human has learned our magic in a millennium. Harry stood straighter. Then I'll stay. Murmurs broke out among the gathered goblins. Ragnarok smiled, a rather frightening expression with so many pointed teeth. Then it is settled. Razorclaw will be your guardian and instructor. You will begin today. Razorclaw looked like he'd just swallowed something unpleasant but nodded stiffly. Thank you, Harry said hesitantly. Don't thank us yet, boy, Razorclaw growled. Your real trials are just beginning. Razorclaw wasn't exaggerating. The next morning began Harry's new life, and it started brutally. Up! Razorclaw shouted, yanking away Harry's furs before dawn had even broken. First lesson, goblins rise with the earth's pulse, not the sun. Harry was given 10 minutes to dress in strange, tough fabric clothes left for him and eat a bowl of gruel before being marched to a cavern where young goblins were already training. They moved through complex patterns with small blades, their movements precise and deadly even at their young age. These younglings are barely 30 years old, mere children by our standards, Razorclaw explained. You will train with them. The young goblins stopped their exercises, staring at Harry with undisguised hostility. A human, spat one, a fierce-looking male with a scar across his cheek. In our training grounds? Director's orders, Grimtooth, Razorclaw replied. The Potter child stays with us. Potter? A female goblin stepped forward, her golden eyes narrowing. The wizard hero? Why would he train with goblins? Because Dumbledore threw him away like garbage, Razorclaw said bluntly. And we found a use for him. Harry flinched at the harsh description but kept his face neutral. He'd learned at the Dursleys that showing weakness only invited more cruelty. I'm not trash, he said quietly but firmly. And I'm not a hero either. I'm just learning to survive. The female goblin studied him for a long moment, then barked out a laugh. Survival I understand, human. I am Silverforge. Try to keep up. What followed was the most physically demanding day of Harry's young life. The goblin children were stronger, faster, and more coordinated than any human 5-year-old could hope to be. They ran through narrow tunnels, climbed sheer rock faces, practiced falling safely onto stone floors, and learned the basics of knife handling. By midday, Harry was covered in bruises and scrapes, his muscles screaming in protest. But he refused to quit. Each time he fell, he got back up. When Grimtooth deliberately tripped him during a running exercise, Harry simply rose silently and rejoined the line, ignoring the jeers. Razorclaw watched it all with calculating eyes, offering neither help nor sympathy. But when Harry successfully completed a difficult climbing challenge that even some goblin children struggled with, Harry caught a flicker of something like approval in his guardian's expression. The afternoon shifted to academic lessons. Harry was taken to a vast library carved into the bedrock, where ancient tomes in languages he couldn't read filled endless shelves. An elderly goblin introduced only as Lorekeeper sat him at a stone table and began his education in gobbledygook, the goblin language. "Your tongue is ill-suited to our speech," the Lorekeeper snapped when Harry struggled with the harsh consonants. "But you will learn or be forever considered mindless as most humans are." By evening, Harry's body ached, and his mind was numb from the effort of memorizing unfamiliar sounds and symbols. When he was finally returned to his small room, he collapsed onto the bed, too exhausted even to eat the meal left for him. Razorclaw stood in the doorway, watching him. "Tomorrow will be harder," he said without emotion. "Decide now if you wish to continue or return to the wizards." Harry forced himself to sit up, ignoring the pain in his muscles. "I'm staying." "Why?" Razorclaw demanded. "You were treated like an enemy today. The young ones will only get crueler before they accept you." Harry thought about it, then answered honestly. "Because nobody expects me to succeed. And because nobody here pretends to care about me when they don't." Razorclaw's eyebrows rose slightly. "An unusual answer." "At my aunt and uncle's, they hated me but pretended to the neighbors they were taking good care of me," Harry explained. "Dumbledore acted like he cared, then left me. At least goblins are honest about not liking me." For the first time, Razorclaw smiled, a small, tight expression, but genuine. "Perhaps there's hope for you yet, Harry Potter." "Just Harry," he corrected. "Or, maybe I need a goblin name if I'm going to live here." Razorclaw considered this. "Names are earned among our kind, not given lightly. For now, you are simply the human child. Earn your place, and you will earn your name." He turned to leave but paused. "One more thing. I am not your friend, your parent, or your savior. I am your taskmaster. But I will be fair. Meet my standards, and you will find respect if not affection." Harry nodded, understanding completely. "That's all I ask." After Razorclaw left, Harry forced himself to eat despite his exhaustion. He would need strength for tomorrow. As he chewed the tough meat, he made himself a promise: he would become whatever he needed to be to survive here, to thrive here. If the wizards didn't want him, fine. He'd find his place among those who valued strength, honesty, and perseverance. He fell asleep that night sore but strangely satisfied. For the first time in his life, the path forward was brutally clear. No false affection, no hidden agendas, just the straightforward challenge of earning his place in a world that wouldn't give him anything for free. Months passed, each day following a punishing routine. Harry rose before dawn, trained until his body threatened to collapse, studied until his mind went numb, then fell into exhausted sleep only to repeat the cycle the next day. Gradually, his body changed. The scrawny, underfed boy from Privet Drive developed wiry muscles. His reflexes quickened. His hands grew calloused from climbing rock faces and practicing with training blades. His ears became attuned to the subtle sounds of the underground, the distant tapping of mining picks, the hiss of molten metal being poured, the whisper of magic flowing through stone. His mind changed too. Under the Lorekeeper's strict tutelage, Harry became fluent in gobbledygook, learning to shape his human mouth around the harsh syllables until even the elders nodded in grudging approval. He absorbed goblin history, their ancient feuds with wizards, their complex honor codes, and their intricate financial systems. But the greatest change came in his magic. 6 months after his arrival, Harry sat cross-legged in a small cavern with Razorclaw, who had been teaching him meditation techniques to sense the magic within himself. "Clear your mind," Razorclaw instructed. "Feel the pulse of the earth beneath you. The magic in the stone." Harry closed his eyes, focusing on the cool floor beneath him. At first, he felt nothing but hard rock. Then, a subtle vibration. A rhythm like a distant heartbeat pulsing through the mountain itself. "I feel it," he whispered, excited. "Now reach for your own magic," Razorclaw continued. "The wizard power you were born with." Harry looked inward, searching for something he'd never consciously touched before. Deep within, he found it, a swirling core of energy, bright and wild. "Try to connect them," Razorclaw urged. "Your magic to the earth magic." Harry imagined extending a tendril of his internal power toward the rhythm beneath him. For a moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly, the connection snapped into place. Power surged through Harry, making him gasp. The stones around him began to glow with soft light, responding to his magic. Razorclaw jumped back, his eyes wide. Enough. Harry broke the connection, blinking in confusion as the stones dimmed. "What happened?" "Something unexpected," Razorclaw said slowly. "Wizard children your age shouldn't be able to channel magic consciously, especially not earth magic. Yet you just lit every runestone in this chamber. Is that bad?" "It's significant." Razorclaw studied him with new intensity. "The elders suspected your magical core might be unusual due to surviving the killing curse, but this..." He shook his head. "We must accelerate your training." From that day forward, Harry's education took a new direction. While he still trained physically with the young goblins, who had moved from open hostility to grudging tolerance, he now spent hours each day with different goblin masters learning their unique magic. Unlike wizard magic, which relied on wands and spoken incantations, goblin magic was internal, intentional, and deeply connected to earth elements. They taught Harry to sense metals beneath the ground, to feel the age and history of crafted objects, and eventually, to infuse his intent into materials he touched. "Goblin magic shapes, wizard magic changes," explained Silverforge's father, a master metalworker, as he guided Harry's hands over a simple copper bracelet. "Imagine your will flowing into the metal, telling it what it truly is." Harry concentrated, feeling his magic seep into the copper. In his mind, he saw the bracelet growing stronger, more resilient. To his astonishment, the dull copper began to glow and transform, taking on the strength and luster of a much finer metal without changing its fundamental nature. "Good," the craftmaster nodded. "You have the touch. With practice, you could become a true shaper." Word of Harry's unusual abilities spread through Deephold. More goblins came to watch him train or test his skills. Some with obvious skepticism, others with growing interest. The elders conferred in private chambers, their discussions intense. Not everyone was pleased with Harry's progress. Grimtooth and his friends found more subtle ways to torment the human child, hiding his belongings, spreading rumors, or, accidentally, striking too hard during combat training. But Harry's most surprising ally emerged in Silverforge, the fierce young female goblin who had first challenged him. "You bleed the same as us," she told him one day after bandaging a cut on his arm inflicted by Grimtooth's slipped blade. "And you don't complain. That's worthy of respect, even for a wizard." "I'm not really a wizard," Harry replied. "I don't even have a wand." Silverforge snorted. "You're both less and more than a wizard. That makes you interesting." Coming from a goblin, this qualified as high praise. Nearly a year after his arrival in Deephold, Ragnarok summoned Harry to the Great Hall. The room was packed with goblins of all ages and ranks, elders, warriors, crafters, and even the young trainees. Razorclaw stood at the front, his face more solemn than usual. "Harry Potter," Ragnarok's voice echoed through the chamber. "You have dwelled among our kind for one full cycle of seasons. By our oldest laws, you must now be either confirmed as a friend of the nation or cast out." Harry stood straight, his heart pounding. Despite his progress, he knew many goblins still opposed his presence. "To be confirmed," Ragnarok continued, "you must pass the trial of tunnels, a test all goblin children face at the cusp of their advancement to warrior training. No human has ever attempted this trial." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Harry glanced at Razorclaw, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. "I accept the trial," Harry said firmly, his gobbledygook perfect and clear. Ragnar nodded, satisfied. "Prepare him." Harry was led to a small chamber where he was given lightweight armor sized for his human frame, a leather cuirass reinforced with metal plates, bracers for his forearms, and sturdy boots. Razorclaw presented him with a small silver knife. "This is all you may take," Razorclaw explained. "The trial tests not just courage but resourcefulness." "What exactly is the trial of tunnels?" Harry asked, securing the knife at his hip. "You'll be sent into the deep tunnels, ancient passages beneath even our city. Your task is to retrieve a token from the heart chamber and return before the sands run out." Razorclaw held up an hourglass. "You have until the last grain falls." "What's in the tunnels?" Razorclaw's expression darkened. "Things older than goblins or wizards. Trust your training. Trust your instincts." He gripped Harry's shoulder, the first time he'd touched the boy without the purpose of correcting a fighting stance or administering first aid. "You are ready," Razorclaw said quietly. "Or you are not. Either way, you face this alone." Harry nodded, a lump in his throat. In his year among the goblins, Razorclaw had become the closest thing to a parent he'd ever known, demanding, stern, but ultimately fair. This felt like both a test and a goodbye. Led to a small stone door embedded in the lowest level of Deephold, Harry faced the assembled goblin elders one last time. Ragnar stepped forward with the hourglass. "When this is turned, you will enter. Find the green crystal at the heart and return with it before the sands empty. Succeed, and you will have a place among us. Fail." He left the consequences unspoken. Harry took a deep breath. "I won't fail." Ragnar turned the hourglass. 2 goblin guards pulled open the stone door, revealing a narrow passage that descended sharply into darkness. Without hesitation, Harry stepped through. The door closed behind him with a dull thud, leaving Harry in near total darkness. Only faint blue lichens growing along the walls provided any light. The air was cold and smelled of damp stone and something else, something ancient and not quite natural. Harry reached out with his senses as he'd been taught, feeling the pulse of the earth around him. The stone here felt different, older, with currents of magic running through it like veins. He began making his way downward, placing each foot carefully on the uneven ground. The passage twisted and branched repeatedly. Harry chose his path by sensing the strongest flow of magic, assuming it would lead to the heart chamber. As he descended deeper, the blue lichen grew scarcer, forcing him to rely more on touch and his developing magical senses than sight. After what felt like hours of careful progress, Harry emerged into a vast cavern dotted with luminous crystals. The space might have been beautiful if not for what filled it, hundreds of scurrying shapes that looked like a nightmarish cross between rats and spiders, with too many legs and glittering black eyes. "Tunnel crawlers," Harry whispered to himself, recognizing the creatures from his lessons. Aggressive scavengers that hunted in packs and could strip flesh from bone in minutes. The nearest creatures paused, sensing his presence. Harry remained perfectly still, remembering Razorclaw's teachings about predator psychology. Movement triggered pursuit. He gradually lowered himself into a crouch, drew his silver knife, and cut a small gash across his palm. Blood welled up, and he let several drops fall onto a nearby crystal. The effect was immediate. The crawlers surged toward the blood, fighting over the scent. Harry used the distraction to skirt the edge of the cavern, moving from shadow to shadow until he reached the passage on the far side. Once clear, he bound his hand with a strip torn from his tunic and continued downward. The next challenge came in the form of a narrow ledge above a seemingly bottomless chasm, barely wide enough for his feet. Wind howled up from the depths, threatening to pluck him from his precarious position. Harry pressed himself against the wall, inching sideways with his face against cold stone. Halfway across, the ledge crumbled beneath one foot, leaving him dangling by his fingertips. Fear surged through him, but with it came something else, a burst of magic responding to his desperation. Acting on instinct, Harry pushed his magic into the stone, using the goblin techniques he'd learned to temporarily strengthen its structure. The rock hardened beneath his grip, providing just enough support for him to swing his legs back onto solid ground and continue. Finally, after navigating a maze of identical passages that shifted and changed behind him, Harry entered the heart chamber. The space was perfectly circular, its walls inscribed with runes that pulsed with golden light. In the center, floating above a pedestal, was a green crystal the size of his fist, glowing with internal fire. Harry approached cautiously, sensing this was too easy. Sure enough, as he reached for the crystal, the runes flared blindingly bright. The chamber began to shake, and the floor beneath the pedestal gave way, revealing a pit filled with writhing darkness. Harry hesitated. The crystal remained suspended in air, but now above a deadly trap. He could sense time running short, the hourglass would be nearly empty by now. Taking a deep breath, Harry focused on the crystal itself. Rather than trying to grab it, he extended his magic toward it, the way he'd learned to connect with metals and stones. The crystal's magic was old and semi-sentient, resisting his attempts to communicate. Harry pushed harder, offering not dominance but respect, one magical being to another. Slowly, the crystal's glow changed from green to blue. It drifted from its position above the pit, floating toward Harry's outstretched hand. The moment his fingers closed around it, the rumbling stopped, and the runes dimmed. Harry didn't wait to see what might happen next. He turned and sprinted back through the tunnels, following his own magical traces like breadcrumbs. Where passages had changed, he forced new openings by pressing his magic into the stone, commanding it to yield. He burst through the final doorway just as the last grains of sand fell through the hourglass, stumbling into the chamber where the goblin elders waited. Cuts and bruises covered his body, his clothes were torn, and exhaustion threatened to drop him where he stood. But in his outstretched hand, the green crystal pulsed with light. The assembled goblins stared in stunned silence. No one had expected him to return at all, much less with the crystal. Ragnarok stepped forward, examining the crystal closely. It changed color, he noted, surprised. The heart stone has acknowledged you. Razorclaw moved to Harry's side, steadying him as his legs threatened to buckle. How did you retrieve it? The final chamber is warded against physical approach. I didn't try to take it, Harry explained between ragged breaths. I asked it to come with me. The elders exchanged significant looks. Ragnarok took the crystal from Harry and held it high. The trial is complete. The human child has succeeded where many goblin children have failed. By our oldest laws, he has earned a place among us. He fixed Harry with a penetrating stare. And he has earned a name. A ripple of astonishment passed through the crowd. Naming was sacred among goblins, usually reserved for their own kind. From this day forward, Ragnarok proclaimed, you shall be known as Harkan, which means, between worlds in the old tongue. Neither fully human nor goblin, but something new. Harkan, the assembled goblins repeated, the name spreading through the chamber like a wave. Harry, now Harkan, felt something shift inside him. The name resonated with his magic, settling into his identity like it had always belonged there. Razorclaw gripped his shoulder, pride evident in his usually stern face. Well done, Harkan. Your true journey begins today. As the goblins dispersed, Harkan noticed Silverforge waiting nearby. She approached and, in a gesture he'd never seen from a goblin before, extended her hand in the human fashion of greeting. Congratulations, Harkan, she said, testing his new name. It seems you belong here after all. Harkan took her hand, grinning despite his exhaustion. Looks like you're stuck with me. For the first time, she smiled back, a fierce expression that somehow suited her perfectly. Perhaps that's not such a terrible fate. That night, Harkan was moved from his small room to proper quarters deeper in the Goblin City, a sign of his new status. As he settled onto his bed, now carved with runes of protection and strength, he reflected on the strange path his life had taken. In just 1 year, he'd gone from an unwanted burden dumped on cold stone steps to a named member of Goblin society. The abandoned wizard boy was disappearing, replaced by something neither world had seen before. As he drifted off to sleep, his last thought was a mixture of determination and defiance. Dumbledore had meant to remove him from the wizarding world, believing him a threat or a liability. Instead, he might have created something far more powerful than anyone could have anticipated. Harkan, the boy between worlds, was just beginning to discover what he could become. Chapter 2, the rising champion Harkan spun beneath the overhead strike, his twin blades flashing in the torchlight as he countered with a sweeping low attack. His opponent, a goblin warrior twice his age named Steel Fist, barely managed to jump the blade before Harkan's second weapon pressed against his throat. "Yield," Harkan said, not even breathing hard. Steel Fist dropped his weapon with a curse. "One day, human, you'll slow down." "Not today," Harkan grinned, sheathing his blades in a fluid motion. 8 years had transformed the scrawny human child into something the Goblin nation had never seen before. At 13, Harkan stood taller than any goblin, his body whipcord lean and covered in a network of scars from countless training sessions. His black hair was worn long in the goblin warrior style, braided with metal beads marking achievements in combat, craft, and magic. The lightning scar on his forehead was now merely one mark among many. Razorclaw watched from the edge of the training pit, arms crossed over his chest. "Acceptable," he called, which from him qualified as extravagant praise. "Your left guard still drops when you spin." "I'll work on it," Harkan replied in flawless gobbledygook, wiping sweat from his brow. The training chamber emptied as warriors headed to their midday meal. Harkan collected his equipment, sensing Razorclaw wanted to speak privately. "The council requests your presence this afternoon," Razorclaw said once they were alone. Harkan raised an eyebrow. "Have I done something to annoy the elders again?" "Not everything revolves around your troublemaking," Razorclaw replied dryly. "Though flooding the treasury level with that experimental water channeling spell last month hasn't been forgotten. The vault doors needed testing against elemental magic," Harkan protested with a grin. "I was being thorough." Razorclaw snorted. "Save your excuses for Ragnarok." Chamber of Elders at the third bell. As his mentor walked away, Harkan noticed Silverforge approaching from the weapons rack. She'd grown into one of Deephold's most respected young warriors, her golden eyes always sharp, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight warrior's knot. "Summoned by the elders?" she asked, falling into step beside him. "What did you do this time?" "Existed, probably," Harkan shrugged. "Gornik's faction is always looking for reasons to restrict my movements. They fear what they don't understand," Silverforge said. "And you, Harkan, are decidedly incomprehensible." That much was true. Over the years, Harkan had developed abilities that bewildered even the oldest goblin masters. He could sense precious metals through solid rock, communicate with the semi-sentient heart stone he'd retrieved in his naming trial, and blend wizard and goblin magic in ways previously thought impossible. "Any news from the surface teams?" Harkan asked as they navigated the busy tunnels leading to the central dining cavern. Silverforge's expression darkened. "More ministry restrictions. The new regulations limit our above-ground activities even further. Now we need special permits just to meet with our own contracted suppliers." "They're getting bolder," Harkan muttered. He'd never returned to the wizarding world since the day Dumbledore abandoned him, but he kept close tabs on wizard politics through Gringotts' extensive information network. The Ministry of Magic had grown increasingly restrictive toward part humans under Minister Fudge's administration. They collected their meals, roasted cave mushrooms and spiced tunnel rabbit, and found seats at their usual table. Harkan's status as a named member of Goblin society entitled him to eat in the warrior section, though several older goblins still glared when he entered. "Grimtooth back from his surface assignment," Silverforge commented, nodding toward a scarred goblin holding court at a distant table. Harkan followed her gaze. Grimtooth had grown from an unpleasant child into a dangerous adult, rising through the ranks to become a security specialist for the bank's surface operations. His hatred for Harkan had only intensified over the years, though he'd learned to mask it better. "Wonderful," Harkan muttered. "Just what I needed today." Sure enough, Grimtooth spotted them and sauntered over, flanked by two of his longtime allies. "The half-breed honors us with his presence," Grimtooth sneered in gobbledygook. "Shouldn't you be practicing how to bow and scrape to wizards? That's all you'll be good for when the elders finally come to their senses." Harkan continued eating, not bothering to look up. "Your surface assignment must have been disappointing if you've come back with nothing better than recycled insults." A muscle twitched in Grimtooth's jaw. "I met a curious wizard today. Old man with a silver beard asking questions about a missing boy." He leaned closer. "Seemed very interested in whether any human children had been seen around Gringotts 8 years ago." That got Harkan's attention. His head snapped up. "Dumbledore was at the bank?" Grimtooth smiled nastily. "Touched a nerve, have I? Worried your wizard master is coming to reclaim his pet." Harkan stood so quickly his bench scraped back across stone. "He is nothing to me." "Really? Then why do you keep that ridiculous wizard name alongside your goblin one?" "Potter." He spat the name. "You're neither fish nor fowl, Harkan. Just a wizard's cast-off we foolishly took in." Silverforge stepped between them before Harkan could respond. "Enough, Grimtooth. Or did you forget who bested you in the last 3 combat trials?" Grimtooth's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. "The council meets today about our human problem. Don't get too comfortable, half-breed." He turned and walked away, his cronies following. "Don't let him bait you," Silverforge muttered as they sat back down. "That's exactly what he wants." Harkan pushed his plate away, appetite gone. Was Dumbledore really at the bank? Probably. He's chief warlock of the Wisengamot, he visits occasionally on official business. She studied his face. "You've never shown much interest in your past before." "Because it doesn't matter," Harkan said firmly. "My life is here." But even as he said it, something stirred inside him, a curiosity he'd long suppressed about the world that had first rejected him. If Dumbledore was asking questions after all these years, something had changed. The Chamber of Elders was Deephold's most sacred space, a perfectly circular room carved from a single massive piece of granite. The walls bore the names of every goblin elder for 1,000 years, etched in golden runes that glowed softly in the dim light. 7 ancient goblins sat in high-backed stone chairs arranged in a semicircle, with Ragnarok at the center. Harkan stood before them, head high, hands clasped behind his back in the formal posture of a goblin warrior addressing the council. "Harkan Potter," Ragnarok began, using both his names in formal address. "You have been summoned to discuss matters of significant importance to the Goblin Nation." "I stand ready to serve, Director," Harkan replied, the ritual response flowing easily after years of training. Ragnarok nodded, satisfied with the formality. "We face challenging times. The wizard ministry grows more restrictive toward our kind with each passing season. Our intelligence suggests new legislation targeting goblin property rights will be introduced within months." An elder to Ragnarok's right, Iron Grip, the head of security operations, leaned forward. "Our ability to gather information within the ministry has become compromised. Too many of our agents are recognized, monitored, or simply banned from entry." Harkan began to understand why he'd been summoned. "You need someone who can move in wizard spaces without drawing attention." "Precisely," Ragnarok confirmed. "You were born of their world but raised in ours. You understand both but belong fully to neither. This makes you uniquely valuable." From the far end of the semicircle came a harsh laugh. Gornik, now one of the elder council members and Harkan's most consistent opponent, shook his head in derision. "Let us speak plainly," Gornik said. "We are considering sending a human child to spy on his own kind. A child who may still harbor sympathies for the world that birthed him. Harkin felt his temper flare but kept his expression neutral. I have proven my loyalty to the Goblin Nation for 8 years, Elder Gornik. My blood, sweat, and magic have been given in service to Deephold. Pretty words, Gornik dismissed. But you have never been tested against your true nature. Faced with wizards, will you remember your place? Or will the comforts of your birth world seduce you back to their side? Before Harkan could defend himself, Razorclaw stepped forward from his position near the chamber door. I have trained this warrior since he was a child, Razorclaw stated flatly. I know his heart as well as any can know another's. His loyalty is not in question. Your judgment might be, Gornik countered. You've grown attached to your human project, Razorclaw. It clouds your assessment. The tension in the room thickened. Ragnarok raised a hand for silence. The council has already voted, he announced. Harkan will be sent to gather intelligence on the new legislation. This will be both a mission of vital importance to our nation and a test of his true allegiances. He fixed Harkan with an uncompromising stare. Do you accept this charge? Harkan didn't hesitate. I do, Director. Good. You leave tomorrow. Iron Grip will brief you on the specifics. Ragnarok stood, signaling the end of the formal audience. Perform well, young warrior, and your position among us will be secured. Fail us. He let the consequences hang unspoken. As the council filed out, Gornik paused beside Harkan. Watch yourself in the wizard world, human. Remember that no matter how well you speak our tongue or wield our weapons, your blood remains unchanged. His voice lowered to a whisper. And blood always tells in the end. After the elders departed, only Razorclaw remained, his expression unusually troubled. You should have been given more time to prepare, he said. I'm ready, Harkan insisted. For the physical challenges, perhaps. But the wizard world is more dangerous to you than blade or spell. Razorclaw gripped Harkan's shoulder. They will try to claim you, remake you in their image. The moment they discover who you are, they will spin stories of the lost hero returned. I know who I am, Harkan said firmly. Do you? Razorclaw's eyes narrowed. You've spent years becoming what we needed you to be. But who are you when no one is watching, Harkan Potter? That's what this mission will reveal. The question lingered in Harkan's mind as he prepared for the journey. His quarters, a spacious cavern he'd gradually personalized over the years, contained few reminders of his human origins. The photo of his parents remained, though faded now, tucked inside a goblin-crafted metal case. His vault key hung on a chain around his neck. Everything else, his clothes, weapons, books, were of goblin make. He packed lightly, selecting items that wouldn't mark him too obviously as goblin-raised. His twin daggers, enchanted by his own hand to return when thrown, were hidden in specially designed sheaths. Gold coins from his vault were sewn into the lining of his cloak. A communication stone, linked to a matching one held by Iron Grip, would allow him to send emergency messages if needed. A soft knock at his door interrupted his preparations. Silverforge entered without waiting for permission, a liberty only she would dare take. So you're finally venturing into the sunlight, she said, leaning against the wall. Try not to blind yourself staring at it. I've been above ground before, Harkan pointed out. He'd occasionally accompanied trading parties to the surface, though never into wizard areas. The night markets of Nocturne Alley hardly count. She crossed the room, examining his packed supplies with a critical eye. You're taking the blood metal blades. Bold choice. They're keyed to my magic. I work better with them than anything else. Silverforge nodded, then unexpectedly pulled something from her belt, a small, flat stone disc carved with runes. Take this too. Harkan accepted it, feeling the magic humming within the stone. A shield stone. These are rare. And restricted to full-blooded goblin warriors, she acknowledged. Which is why officially, I'm not giving you one. He looked up, surprised by the gesture. Silver Forge, don't make it sentimental, she cut him off. You're too valuable an investment to lose on your first surface mission. But her eyes betrayed concern beneath the practical explanation. Harkan slipped the shield stone into an inner pocket, understanding the risk she was taking. I'll return it when I come back. See that you do. She headed for the door but paused at the threshold. The wizard world discarded you once, Harkan. Don't forget that when they inevitably try to reclaim you. After she left, Harkan finished his preparations with a strange feeling in his chest. He'd spent years proving himself to the Goblin nation, fighting twice as hard as any young goblin to earn half the respect. Yet now, facing his first real test, he realized how deeply he'd come to value the connections he'd formed here, Razorclaw's gruff mentorship, Silverforge's fierce friendship, even Ragnarok's calculating support. The wizard world might be where he was born, but Deephold had become his home. Diagon Alley assaulted Harkan's senses like a physical blow. After years in the dim, orderly confines of Deephold, the bright colors, chaotic movements, and overwhelming noise of the wizarding shopping district left him momentarily disoriented. He stood at the entrance, dressed in plain but well-made wizard robes purchased by Gringotts human agents. His hair was pulled back in a simple tail rather than the goblin warrior braids, and he'd carefully arranged his fringe to cover his lightning scar. To any observer, he appeared to be an ordinary teenager, perhaps shopping for school supplies. His mission was deceptively straightforward: infiltrate a meeting at the Ministry of Magic where the new anti-goblin legislation would be discussed. A wizard lawyer who secretly worked for Gringotts would provide him access, but Harkan would need to navigate the ministry building undetected, record the proceedings using a goblin-crafted memory crystal, and exit without raising suspicions. First, though, he needed to acclimate to the wizard world. Iron Grip had insisted he spend a day in Diagon Alley before attempting the ministry infiltration, allowing him to adjust to human behaviors and patterns. Harkan took a deep breath and stepped into the crowd, mimicking the casual stroll of other shoppers. He kept his movements fluid and his face relaxed, though his eyes constantly scanned his surroundings with the vigilance of a goblin warrior. The shops fascinated him. Flourish and Blots with its towering bookshelves, magical menagerie with creatures he'd only read about, quality Quidditch supplies with broomsticks that seemed impossibly fragile to someone raised on goblin-forged steel. He paused at each storefront, absorbing details while appearing to simply window shop. He overheard snippets of conversation as he walked, complaints about Gringotts security procedures, gossip about ministry politics, parents discussing Hogwarts preparations. The casual way wizards spoke about goblins, dismissive at best, derogatory at worst, made his jaw clench. They saw the beings who had raised him as little more than clever, untrusting creatures who managed their money. Near Fortescue's ice cream parlor, Harkan's attention was caught by a newspaper left on an empty table. The Daily Prophet's headline blared, "Hogwarts security tightened as term approaches." He picked it up, scanning the article quickly. Apparently, there had been concerns about security at the wizard school after several alarming incidents the previous year. The article mentioned, following the unfortunate events in the Chamber of Secrets, and renewed vigilance after the Longbottom boys' close call with you-know-whose memory. Harkan frowned, absorbing this unexpected information. Neville Longbottom, a name he vaguely remembered from his briefings as the other child who might have fulfilled the prophecy about Voldemort. And mentions of you-know-whose memory suggested something of the Dark Wizard had survived, at least in some form. "Are you going to order something, young man, or just read abandoned papers?" Harkan looked up to find Florian Fortescue himself standing there, a good-natured but expectant expression on his face. "Sorry," Harkan said, quickly folding the paper. "I'll have whatever you recommend." "First time in the alley?" Fortescue asked as he returned with a towering sundae minutes later. "That obvious?" Harkan managed a self-deprecating smile. "You have that wide-eyed look. Homeschooled, I'm guessing. Don't see you with the usual Hogwarts crowd." Harkan nodded, seizing the provided cover story. My family travels a lot. This is my first time in London. As he ate the ice cream, a novel experience that would have scandalized most goblins, who considered frozen treats frivolous, Harkin continued scanning the alley. His gaze stopped on the imposing white facade of Gringotts Bank. Strange to think that beneath that ordinary-looking building lay the vast network of tunnels and caverns he called home. Just as he was finishing his ice cream, a commotion near the bank caught his attention. A tall figure with long silver hair and beard had emerged from Gringotts, surrounded by a small crowd of admirers and petitioners. Harkin felt his blood run cold. Even after 8 years, he recognized Albus Dumbledore instantly. The wizard looked exactly as he remembered, tall and imposing in rich purple robes, half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose, expression benevolently attentive as he spoke with the people around him. Without conscious thought, Harkin found himself moving closer, drawn by a mixture of curiosity and long-suppressed anger. He slipped through the crowd with the silent grace taught by years of goblin training, positioning himself where he could hear Dumbledore's conversation. Most unfortunate timing, Dumbledore was saying to a red-haired man Harkin would later identify as Arthur Weasley. The Board of Governors is quite concerned about these new regulatory proposals. Coming on the heels of last year's troubles at the school, it presents a challenging political landscape. Fudge is determined to push it through, Weasley replied, looking worried. Claims it's about security after that business with the cursed artifacts found in Knockturn Alley. But really, it's just another excuse to restrict goblin commerce. Perhaps, Dumbledore agreed. Though I wonder if there isn't something more at play. The timing seems convenient. Harkin edged closer, hungry for more information. His foot scuffed against the cobblestone, a small noise, but enough to catch Dumbledore's attention. The old wizard's eyes flicked toward him, passing over briefly, then snapping back with sudden intensity. For one heart-stopping moment, their eyes locked. Harkin saw recognition flash across Dumbledore's face, followed by something that looked remarkably like fear. "It cannot be," Dumbledore whispered, so softly that only Harkin's goblin-trained hearing caught it. Harkin broke the eye contact and melted back into the crowd, heart hammering. He'd been recognized, or at least, Dumbledore suspected who he was. He needed to disappear before the wizard could approach him. Using every evasion tactic Razorclaw had drilled into him, Harkin weaved through side alleys and doubled back several times, ensuring he wasn't followed. Eventually, he found his way to the Leaky Cauldron, where he'd arranged to meet his ministry contact. As he sat in a dark corner of the pub, hands wrapped around a butterbeer he wasn't drinking, Harkin's mind raced. Dumbledore had recognized him after 8 years. What did that mean? Had the old wizard been searching for him all this time? And if so, why now, after abandoning him so callously? His contact, a thin, nervous-looking wizard named Penser, arrived an hour later, sliding into the seat across from him with exaggerated casualness. "There's been a complication," Penser muttered without preamble. "Security at the ministry has been doubled. Dumbledore himself is calling for an emergency Wisengamot session tomorrow." "Why?" Harkin demanded. Penser shrugged. "Rumors flying everywhere. Something about new evidence of you-know-who's supporters regrouping. Others say it's about a significant magical detection in Diagon Alley today." He gave Harkin a searching look. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Harkin kept his expression neutral. "Just tell me if the mission is still on." "It's on, but the risk factor has tripled. Getting you in will be harder, getting you out possibly impossible if you're caught." Penser slid a small package across the table. "Ministry visitor badge, enchanted to avoid scrutiny. Directions to the meeting chamber. You'll have a 15-minute window to place the recording crystal before the security wards activate." Harkin pocketed the package. "I'll be ready." "The goblins must want this information badly to risk sending someone so young," Penser commented, studying Harkin's face. "You're not what I expected." "I never am," Harkin replied coolly. "Same meeting point afterward?" Penser nodded and stood to leave. One more thing, avoid the second floor tomorrow. Dumbledore will be meeting with the minister there before the Wisengamot session. After his contact left, Harkin remained at the table, considering his options. The mission parameters had changed, becoming significantly more dangerous. The prudent choice would be to abort, return to Deephold, and report the complications. But returning without the information would be seen as failure by Gornik's faction. They already questioned his loyalty and ability. This would give them ammunition to restrict his role in Goblin society even further. And after seeing Dumbledore today, Harkin felt a burning need to understand more about the wizard world's politics, and perhaps his own abandoned place in it. He made his decision. The mission would proceed. The Ministry of Magic was a monument to wizard arrogance. From the ostentatious atrium with its peacock blue ceiling and golden symbols moving like some strange celestial display, to the fountain featuring magical creatures gazing adoringly at wizards, every detail screamed superiority and entitlement. Harkin moved through the morning crowd of ministry workers, visitor badge pinned to his robes, expression carefully crafted to show mild interest but not suspicion. His goblin-trained senses catalogued escape routes, security positions, and the flow of foot traffic. Following Pencer's directions, he made his way to Level 4, the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. The meeting would take place in a small conference room where department heads would discuss the draft legislation before presenting it to the Wisengamot. The corridor was mostly empty when he arrived. According to Pencer, he had approximately 10 minutes before ministry officials would begin gathering. Harkin checked that the coast was clear, then slipped inside the conference room. Working quickly, he identified the optimal placement for the recording crystal, beneath the central table, where it would capture all voices equally. The crystal was goblin-made, designed to be undetectable by standard wizard security measures. It would record for exactly 1 hour before dissolving harmlessly into magical residue that would dissipate within minutes. Just as he finished securing the crystal, he heard voices approaching. There was no time to leave without being seen. Harkin looked around frantically, spotting a small supply closet at the back of the room. He slipped inside, pulling the door nearly closed but leaving the smallest crack to monitor the situation. Ministry officials began filing in, department heads, legal advisors, and security personnel. Harkin recognized some from the briefing materials: Dolores Umbridge with her irritating pink outfit and girlish voice, Bartemius Crouch looking severe and proper, and several others whose names escaped him. "The minister will be joining us shortly," announced Umbridge, taking a seat near the head of the table. "He's currently in discussions with Dumbledore regarding the other situation." "Are the two matters related?" asked a wizard Harkin didn't recognize. "Possibly," Umbridge smiled unpleasantly. "The timing is certainly interesting. Now, shall we begin reviewing the Goblin Regulatory Amendment Act while we wait?" For the next 20 minutes, Harkin listened as they discussed increasingly restrictive measures against goblin commerce, property rights, and free movement. The proposals were worse than Gringotts had anticipated, not just limiting goblin access to wizard spaces but actually restricting what magical items goblins could legally create and own. "The security concerns are legitimate," Crouch was saying. "After the incident with those cursed artifacts traced to goblin metalwork, those artifacts were wizard-made," interrupted an elderly witch. "The report clearly stated, the report was inconclusive," Umbridge cut in sweetly. "And really, better safe than sorry when it comes to dangerous creatures, wouldn't you agree?" Harkin's fists clenched as he listened to them casually discuss restricting the rights of beings they clearly considered inferior. Everything the goblins had told him about wizard prejudice was playing out before his eyes. The door to the conference room suddenly banged open, and Minister Fudge hurried in, looking flustered. "Sorry for the delay. Had a most disturbing conversation with Dumbledore." "About the Potter boy?" asked Umbridge, leaning forward eagerly. Harkin froze, his full attention now riveted on the conversation. Fudge ran a handkerchief over his forehead. "Albus is convinced he saw him yesterday in Diagon Alley. After all these years. Can you imagine? The boy who lived, suddenly reappearing." Murmurs spread around the table. But the boy was declared legally dead 3 years ago, Crouch pointed out. After exhaustive searches failed to locate him. Precisely what I reminded Albus, Fudge agreed. But he insists it was Potter. Says the magical signature registered on Ministry sensors confirms it. If Potter is alive, where has he been all this time? Someone asked. Dumbledore has a theory, Fudge said darkly. One I find disturbing in the extreme. He believes the boy may have been taken in by goblins. The room erupted in exclamations of disbelief and concern. Impossible. Crouch declared. The goblins would have handed him over to the Ministry immediately. Unless they saw an opportunity, Umbridge suggested, her voice sickeningly sweet. Think of it, the boy who lived, raised by creatures with a historical grudge against wizard kind. Shaped to their purposes. It would explain why they've been unusually resistant to our proposed regulations. Perhaps they've been planning to use him against us all along. Harkin's blood ran cold. The Ministry already suspected exactly what had happened, twisting it into something sinister. This changes everything, Fudge declared. If the goblins have been harboring and potentially weaponizing Harry Potter all these years, we need more than regulations. We need to completely reevaluate our security posture regarding Gringotts. The public will be outraged when they learn their hero has been kept from them, Umbridge added. It could provide the support we need for more aggressive measures. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, cautioned an older wizard. We have no proof beyond Dumbledore's claim that he glimpsed a boy who resembled Potter. Then we'll get proof, Fudge declared. I'm authorizing a formal investigation. If Potter is alive and under goblin influence, we'll find him and extract him from their control. The meeting continued, but Harkan had heard enough. The recording crystal would capture the rest. He needed to report back to Deephold immediately. The situation was far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. He waited until the meeting shifted to reviewing specific legislative language, then slipped out of the closet during a particularly heated debate that had everyone's attention. Using every stealth technique he'd mastered, he edged toward the door and silently exited the room. His heart pounded as he made his way back toward the atrium, keeping his head down and his pace unhurried despite the urge to run. Everything had changed. The Ministry wasn't just targeting goblin rights, they were potentially coming after him specifically, reframing his adoption by the Goblin Nation as a sinister kidnapping. He was nearly to the security checkpoint when a familiar voice stopped him cold. I thought I might find you here, Harry. Harkan turned slowly to find Albus Dumbledore standing calmly in an alcove, as if he'd been waiting patiently for this moment. Up close, the wizard looked older than Harkan remembered, the lines on his face deeper, the blue eyes behind the half-moon spectacles carrying a weariness that hadn't been there 8 years ago. My name is Harkan, he replied coldly. Is it now? Dumbledore's expression showed genuine curiosity. A goblin name, I presume. Most interesting. He stepped closer, examining Harkan with undisguised fascination. You've grown into a remarkable young man. No thanks to you, Harkan shot back, his carefully maintained facade cracking under the weight of long-suppressed anger. You left me on cold stone steps and walked away. A decision I have regretted every day since, Dumbledore said quietly. One I made based on information that proved catastrophically wrong. The prophecy you mentioned. The one that said I needed to be removed from your world. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. You remember that conversation? You were very young. I remember everything, Harkan said flatly. Including how quickly my relatives handed me over to you, and how easily you abandoned me. I believed I was preventing a greater tragedy, Dumbledore sighed. A second prophecy emerged after Voldemort's fall, suggesting you would bring destruction to the wizarding world if raised within it. I made the terrible choice to remove you, believing the Ministry would find you quickly and place you with a magical family outside Britain. But they didn't find me. The goblins did. Yes. Dumbledore's eyes gleamed with renewed interest. And instead of alerting the Ministry as I expected, they kept you. Raised you as their own, it seems. A development I never anticipated. Harkan realized they were attracting attention. This conversation couldn't continue here, not with ministry officials potentially looking for him after Fudge's meeting. I need to go, he said tersely. Harry, Harkan, Dumbledore corrected himself. We have much to discuss. The prophecy that led to your removal was false, planted by those who feared your potential. I've spent years searching for you, trying to right my grievous error. 8 years too late, Harkan replied coldly. I have a home now. A people who didn't discard me when I became inconvenient. The Goblin Nation is using you, Dumbledore said gently. Whatever they've told you, whatever they've trained you for, you must understand your importance to our world. Harkan laughed bitterly. Your world just spent an hour discussing how to further oppress the beings who raised me. Minister Fudge is launching an investigation to extract me from Goblin influence. Tell me, Headmaster, which side is really using me? Before Dumbledore could respond, Harkan spotted Ministry security wizards entering the atrium, their eyes scanning the crowds with clear purpose. They're looking for you, Dumbledore observed. You've involved yourself in Goblin espionage at a perilously young age. I've involved myself in protecting my people, Harkan corrected. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment, then unexpectedly nodded. Go. The security ward on the visitor entrance will deactivate for precisely 30 seconds. He pulled out a pocket watch. Beginning now. Harkan hesitated, suspicious of the sudden assistance. We will meet again, Harkan Potter, Dumbledore said softly. When you're ready to hear the full truth about your parents, your heritage, and why Voldemort sought to kill you as a baby. There is more at stake than Goblin rights or Ministry regulations. Something in Dumbledore's tone, an urgency beneath the calm exterior, gave Harkan pause. But the security wizards were moving closer, and his window of escape was closing. Without another word, he turned and walked swiftly toward the exit, slipping through just as the magical barrier reactivated behind him. You were seen. Razorclaw roared, pacing the small chamber where Gringotts Security Council had convened upon Harkan's return. By Dumbledore himself. Do you understand what you've done? Harkan stood rigid, accepting the rebuke. I completed the mission. The recording crystal captured everything, and nearly got yourself captured in the process. Razorclaw slammed his fist on the stone table. The Ministry is in an uproar. Aurors have already visited the bank with questions about a dark-haired youth seen leaving the Ministry under suspicious circumstances. I wasn't followed. I'm certain of it. Only because Dumbledore apparently helped you escape, Gornick interjected acidly. He had insisted on being present for Harkan's debriefing. How interesting that your former wizard master so conveniently appeared to assist you. He's not my master, Harkan snapped. And his help wasn't planned or solicited. Yet you accepted it, Gornick noted. Your first instinct when cornered wasn't to rely on goblin training but to accept wizard aid. Ragnarok, who had been silently listening to the exchange, finally raised a hand for quiet. The boy retrieved valuable intelligence at great personal risk. Before we condemn his methods, let us examine what he discovered. The recording crystal's contents had already been extracted and analyzed by Gringotts' Intelligence Division. A goblin analyst stepped forward with the report. The Ministry's planned restrictions go far beyond what our informants had indicated, she explained. They intend to classify certain forms of goblin magic as dangerous artifacts subject to confiscation. The legislation includes provisions for Ministry inspection of Gringotts vaults suspected of containing such items. Murmurs of outrage filled the chamber. Furthermore, the analyst continued, Minister Fudge has authorized an investigation into our alleged harboring of Harry Potter. They're framing it as a potential kidnapping case. As I warned, Gornick said smugly. The human's presence among us has brought exactly the scrutiny we sought to avoid. No, Harkan interjected. The legislation was already planned before Dumbledore spotted me. My presence may have accelerated their timeline, but they've been working on these restrictions for months. Ragnak stroked his long fingers thoughtfully along his desk. What of this claim that the prophecy leading to your abandonment was false? Did Dumbledore elaborate? No, Harkan admitted. Only that it was planted by people who feared my potential. Convenient, Gornik scoffed. After 8 years, he suddenly discovers the prophecy was false, just as you become useful to us. Harkan had been wondering the same thing, but hearing Gornik voice the suspicion annoyed him. Dumbledore seemed genuinely surprised to see me alive. Whatever his agenda, I don't think he expected our paths to cross yesterday. Enough speculation, Ragnak decided. We must respond to this threat. The Ministry moves against us on multiple fronts, legal restrictions, vault inspections, and now this investigation into Harkan's status. We should return the boy to them, Gornik suggested. With appropriate diplomatic assurances about his treatment here, of course. It would defuse the most explosive element of their case against us. Absolutely not, Razorclaw growled. The boy is named of our nation. We do not surrender our own. The boy is the reason they're coming after us. Gornik slammed his fist down. One human child weighed against the welfare of all Goblinkind. The choice is clear. Harkan stood rigid, listening to them debate his fate as if he weren't present. The same anger that had flared when confronting Dumbledore began to burn again, the feeling of being a pawn in games played by others. I will not be traded away, he said, his voice cutting through the argument. Not by the Ministry, not by Dumbledore, and not by this council. The chamber fell silent, all eyes turning to him. You forget your place, young one, Gornik said dangerously. My place is what I've spent 8 years earning, Harkan replied, his voice steady. I am Harkan, named of the Goblin nation, trained in your ways, loyal to your people. I will not be used as a bargaining chip in wizard politics. He turned to Ragnak. Director, the Ministry doesn't just want me back, they want to use me as justification for controlling Goblin society. Returning me won't satisfy them, it will only confirm their narrative that I've been held captive all these years. Ragnak studied him with narrowed eyes. What do you propose instead? Let me stay in the wizard world, Harkan said, the plan forming as he spoke. Not as Harry Potter returned from the dead, but as Harkan, a goblin-trained wizard broker. I can gather intelligence, build connections, and work from within to counter their efforts. Absolutely not, Razorclaw objected. You're too young, too recognizable, and exactly what we need, Harkan countered. Someone who understands both worlds. Who better to defend goblin interests in wizard spaces than someone trained for exactly that purpose? Gornik laughed incredulously. You expect us to trust a 13-year-old human to represent goblin interests in the wizarding world? Perhaps your human arrogance exceeds even Dumbledore's. Not alone, Harkan clarified. As part of a strategic response by Gringotts. But I can go places full-blooded goblins cannot, speak to people who would dismiss goblin representatives, and move through wizard society in ways no one else here can. The council members exchanged glances, some thoughtful, others skeptical. There is precedent, Ragnak said slowly. In the Goblin Wars of the 15th century, we employed human agents as intermediaries. Some proved quite effective. This is different, Gornik insisted. Those humans were adults, hired mercenaries. This is a child raised among us who still carries wizard blood and magic. His true loyalties remain untested. Then test them, Harkan challenged, turning to face Gornik directly. Set me a task that proves my commitment to the Goblin nation once and for all. A calculating look crossed Gornik's face. You wish to prove yourself? Very well. He turned to Ragnak. The ritual of iron and stone. If he survives that, even I would acknowledge his right to serve as our agent. Gasps and mutters spread through the chamber. Razorclaw stepped forward, his expression thunderous. That ritual hasn't been used in centuries. It was designed for full-blooded goblins ascending to war leadership, not for not for humans. Gornik finished. Precisely my point. If Harkin truly considers himself one of us, truly wants to represent our interests in the wizard world, let him prove it through the ancient way. Harkin looked between them, sensing the significance of what was being proposed. What is this ritual? Ragnarok answered, his voice solemn. The ritual of iron and stone is how we once selected our greatest warriors, those who would lead our forces in times of conflict with the wizard world or other enemies. It tests not just physical strength and magical ability, but the very essence of what it means to be goblin. No human has ever undergone it, Razorclaw added. It wasn't designed for wizard physiology or magic. Has anyone died during this ritual? Harkan asked bluntly. Many, Gornik confirmed with a thin smile. Even full-blooded goblins of great strength and skill. For a human, I would consider it unlikely you would survive. Harkan understood the trap Gornik had laid. Refuse, and he would be labeled a coward unwilling to truly commit to goblin ways. Accept, and he faced a potentially lethal challenge designed to break him. Either way, Gornik removed him as a factor in goblin politics. But Harkan hadn't survived 8 years of goblin training by backing down from challenges. I accept, he said firmly, meeting Gornik's surprised gaze. When? The ritual requires preparation, Ragnarok said. 3 days hence, at the dark of the moon. Director, this is madness, Razorclaw protested. The boy is valuable to us alive, not as a martyr to goblin tradition. The boy has accepted the challenge, Ragnarok replied. By our laws, it must proceed. He turned to Harkan. You have 3 days to prepare, young warrior. I suggest you use them wisely. As the council dispersed, Razorclaw pulled Harkan aside, his expression furious. You fool. Gornik manipulated you perfectly. Do you know what the ritual of iron and stone entails? No, Harkan admitted. But I couldn't refuse without confirming every suspicion about my loyalty. There are other ways to prove loyalty besides suicide, Razorclaw hissed. The ritual will test you against the primal elements of goblin magic, forces that have shattered full-blooded goblins with centuries of magical development behind them. Then I'll be the first human to survive it, Harkan said with more confidence than he felt. Razorclaw studied him for a long moment, then sighed heavily. If you're determined to go through with this madness, you'll need specialized training. Meet me in the deep forge at midnight. We have much work to do. The next 3 days passed in a blur of intense preparation. Razorclaw drove Harkan harder than ever before, drilling him in obscure aspects of goblin magic he'd previously only learned in theory. They worked through the nights in the deep forge, Gringotts' most ancient magical site, where the boundary between physical and magical reality thinned. Silverforge joined them on the second day, her expression grim when she learned what Harkan had agreed to. You could have chosen a less dramatic way to get yourself killed, she observed dryly as she helped him practice channeling earth magic through iron conductors. Gornik didn't leave me much choice, Harkan replied, concentrating on maintaining the flow of magic without allowing the iron to overheat and melt. There's always a choice, she countered. You could have accepted temporary exile from Deephold until the political situation changed. You could have agreed to meet with Dumbledore under controlled conditions to learn more about this false prophecy. She paused, watching as the iron rod in Harkan's hands began to glow. Instead, you chose the one option guaranteed to either kill you or elevate you beyond Gornik's reach. Harkan lost concentration, and the rod suddenly shattered, sending fragments flying against the shield Silverforge hastily erected. Maybe I'm tired of being caught between worlds, he admitted, staring at his burned palms. Wizard-born but goblin-raised. Human but not accepted by humans. Named of the goblin nation but still called the human behind my back. Silverforge regarded him thoughtfully. The ritual won't change that, you know. Even if you survive, even if you achieve what no human has before, you'll still be between worlds. But I'll have earned my place once and for all, Harkan insisted. No more debates about my loyalty or value to the nation. No more Gornik questioning my every action. Is that worth dying for? Harkan didn't answer immediately. Was it? Or was he simply reacting to Dumbledore's reappearance, to the Ministry's plans, to Gornik's provocations, allowing others to dictate his choices once again? I don't know, he finally admitted. But I do know I'm done being a pawn in someone else's game. On the third day, Harkan was secluded in a preparation chamber, fasting and meditating as tradition required before the ritual. Ragnarok visited briefly, studying the young human with calculating eyes. You understand that I cannot intervene once the ritual begins, the director said. Even if it goes badly. I understand. Gornik believes he has engineered your destruction, Ragnarok continued bluntly. He sees you as a threat to goblin traditions and purity. And what do you see me as, director? Harkan asked, genuinely curious. Ragnarok's lips twisted in what might have been a smile. An unexpected variable in a very old equation. The goblin nation has existed in the shadow of wizard kind for centuries, Harkan. We have survived through cunning, through fierce protection of what little territory we're permitted, through careful management of the one power wizards respect, financial control. He stepped closer. But the winds are changing. The ministry grows more restrictive, the old blood purist families regain influence, and rumors suggest darker forces stir in the wizard world. Voldemort, Harkan said flatly. Perhaps. Ragnarok nodded. In such times, traditional approaches may not suffice. We may need unexpected solutions. Like a human raised as goblin. Like a warrior who stands between worlds, Ragnarok corrected. Should you survive tonight, Harkan Potter, you will become something neither goblin nor wizard society has seen before. A bridge, perhaps. Or a weapon. With those cryptic words, he left Harkan to his final preparations. The ritual chamber lay at Gringotts' deepest level, far below even the high-security vaults where the oldest wizard families stored their treasures. Carved from a single massive piece of obsidian, the circular space gleamed in the light of ancient magical flames that burned without fuel in recesses along the walls. Harkan entered wearing only a simple loincloth, his body marked with ritual sigils painted in a mixture of iron dust and his own blood. The chamber was filled with goblin observers, elders, warriors, craftmasters, all come to witness either a historic achievement or a spectacular failure. Razorclaw stood near the entrance, his face impassive but his eyes tracking Harkan's every movement. Silverforge had taken position directly opposite, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Gornik sat among the elders, a satisfied smile playing at his lips as he watched the human boy approach the center of the chamber. Ragnarok, as director, would oversee the ritual. He stood on a raised platform, dressed in ancient ceremonial armor that had been worn by Gringotts' directors for 1,000 years. We gather to witness the ritual of iron and stone, Ragnarok's voice echoed through the chamber. Through which our ancestors determined who would lead in times of war and conflict. He gestured to Harkan. Harkan Potter, named of the Goblin Nation, has claimed the right to undertake this trial. No human has done so before. Should he succeed, he will earn the title and responsibilities of War King, liaison between our world and the wizards, protector of goblin interests in human spaces, commander of our warriors should conflict arise. Murmurs spread through the assembled goblins. The title of War King hadn't been bestowed in over 3 centuries. For many, it existed only in historical texts and legends. Should he fail, Ragnarok continued, his name will be honored among the fallen brave, but his ambitions will die with him. He fixed Harkan with a penetrating stare. Do you still wish to proceed? I do, Harkan replied, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his stomach. Ragnarok nodded and struck a small gong 3 times. At the third resonant note, the floor beneath Harkan's feet began to shift and change. The obsidian became liquid-like, swirling around his ankles, then solidifying into a perfect circle that separated him from the rest of the chamber. The ritual has 3 phases, Ragnarok explained. body, magic, and spirit. Each must be passed in succession. There is no shame in yielding before death claims you. With that less than reassuring statement, he struck the gong once more, and the first trial began. From the walls of the chamber emerged 3 goblin warriors, each bearing traditional weapons, a curved short sword, a spiked flail, and a set of throwing daggers. They wore no armor but moved with the confidence of veterans who needed none. The trial of body, Ragnarok announced. Defeat the champions without killing them. Without warning, all 3 attacked simultaneously. Harkan dodged the first sword stroke, ducking beneath it and rolling away from the whistling flail. He was at an immediate disadvantage, unarmed against 3 experienced warriors. But Razorclaw hadn't spent 8 years training him for nothing. Harkan moved with fluid grace, using the confined space to force the warriors to impede each other. When the dagger wielder lunged, Harkan sidestepped, grabbing the goblin's wrist and using his momentum to send him crashing into the swordsman. The flail wielder pressed the advantage, his weapon whistling dangerously close to Harkan's head. Harkan dropped low, sweeping his leg in a move that would have worked against a human opponent but barely staggered the stocky goblin. What followed was the most intense combat Harkan had ever experienced. Every skill, every reflex, every lesson in pain tolerance was pushed to its limit. He took hits that would have incapacitated a normal human, used the warriors' weapons against each other, and gradually wore them down through superior endurance and unpredictable human fighting patterns. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, Harkan stood panting in the center of the circle, one foot placed firmly on the chest of the last conscious champion. All 3 goblins were defeated, though Harkan himself was bleeding from a dozen wounds. The watching crowd murmured in appreciation. Even Gornek looked mildly impressed, though his satisfied smile hadn't faded. The physical trial had been expected to be Harkan's strongest showing, given his years of combat training. Ragnarok struck the gong again. The trial of body is complete. Prepare for the trial of magic. The defeated warriors were helped from the circle, and the obsidian floor began to shift again. This time, it rose around Harkan, forming a waist-high barrier that encircled him completely. From beneath the floor emerged 4 pedestals, each bearing a different element, a bowl of water, a burning brazier, a mound of earth, and a crystal that somehow contained swirling air. The trial of magic requires control of the elemental forces, Ragnarok explained. You must harmonize what cannot be harmonized, balance what seeks imbalance. Harkan understood the challenge immediately. Goblin magic centered on earth elements, metal and stone particularly. But true mastery required understanding how all elements interacted. He would need to simultaneously control opposing forces, preventing them from overwhelming each other while maintaining his own magical core against their drain. He placed his hands palm down on the obsidian barrier and closed his eyes, reaching out with his magical senses. Each element pulsed with its own distinct rhythm, water flowing and adaptive, fire consuming and transformative, earth stable and enduring, air elusive and free. Drawing on everything he'd learned about goblin magic, Harkan extended tendrils of his own power toward each element. The challenge wasn't forcing them to obey, that was wizard thinking, but rather understanding their nature so deeply that they responded to his will voluntarily. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, each element began to react. The water rippled, the fire danced higher, the earth shifted, and the air crystal hummed. Harkan felt his control establishing, the connection strengthening. Then the true test began. The elements started fighting each other, water attempting to douse fire, earth trying to dam water, fire seeking to consume earth, air feeding fire while dispersing water. Harkan gritted his teeth, sweat breaking out across his body as he struggled to maintain harmony among fundamentally opposed forces. His wizard magic wanted to dominate, to force compliance. His goblin training demanded cooperation and respect for each element's nature. The conflict between these approaches tore at him physically, blood beginning to seep from his nose and ears as the magical strain intensified. In desperation, Harkan stopped trying to control the elements separately. Instead, he opened himself completely, allowing all four elemental forces to flow through him simultaneously. Pain beyond anything he'd experienced seared through his body as incompatible magics collided within his magical core. The watching goblins saw Harkon's body rise several inches off the ground, surrounded by a nimbus of multicolored light. The elements on their pedestals began to orbit around him, accelerating until they blurred together in a ring of pure magical energy. Inside this maelstrom, Harkon made a discovery that would change his understanding of magic forever. The elements weren't truly opposed. Their conflict came from incomplete perspective. From a higher vantage point, they were all expressions of the same fundamental force, different faces of a single magical reality. With this realization, the pain suddenly vanished. The swirling elements stabilized, and Harkon found himself at the center of a perfectly balanced magical matrix, each element distinct but harmonious with the others. He opened his eyes, now glowing with power, and gently directed the elements back to their pedestals. As his feet touched the ground again, there was absolute silence in the chamber. Even Gornek's smile had vanished, replaced by open shock. Razorclaw's expression showed fierce pride tinged with concern. What Harkon had just done shouldn't have been possible, not for a goblin, and certainly not for a human. He had demonstrated mastery of elemental magic that went beyond traditional goblin understanding. Ragnar's voice, when he finally spoke, carried a note of genuine respect. The trial of magic is complete. Few have achieved such mastery. He struck the gong a third time. Prepare for the final trial. The trial of spirit. The pedestals sank back into the floor, and the obsidian barrier dissolved. Harkon stood alone in the circle, physically exhausted and magically drained. Whatever came next would test him at his weakest point. The chamber's magical flames dimmed until only a faint glow remained, casting everything in deep shadow. From the darkness at the center of the circle, something began to take shape, not physical but a coalescing of magical energy into semi-solid form. The trial of spirit confronts you with yourself, Ragnar's voice echoed. Your fears, your doubts, your divided loyalties. Only one whose spirit is true to the goblin nation can emerge victorious. The shape solidified into a mirror image of Harkon himself, but not as he currently appeared. This doppelganger wore wizard robes emblazoned with the Hogwarts crest. His hair was neatly trimmed in wizard fashion, his lightning scar prominently visible. He carried a wand and radiated confident power. Harry Potter, the doppelganger spoke, his voice identical to Harkon's but with different inflections. The boy who lived. Wizard hero, not goblin servant. I am Harkon, he replied firmly. The doppelganger laughed. A made-up name for a made-up life. This isn't who you were meant to be. Look at what awaits you in your true world. The air beside the doppelganger shimmered, revealing images of Hogwarts Castle, of cheering wizard crowds, of Dumbledore beaming with pride. Of a red-haired boy and a bushy-haired girl who somehow seemed like they should be his friends. Of a life filled with sunlight and possibility. Your birthright, the doppelganger continued. Your destiny. The goblins took it from you, raised you in darkness to serve their purposes. Used you. Made you a weapon against your own kind. That's not true, Harkon protested, but doubt crept into his voice. Hadn't he wondered the same things himself sometimes? Isn't it? The doppelganger gestured, and new images appeared, Gornek plotting against him, Ragnar calculating his political value, even Razorclaw reporting on his progress to the council. They never loved you, the doppelganger pressed. Goblins don't love humans. They tolerated you. Used you. Shaped you into something useful. Harkon faltered, the accusation striking at his deepest insecurities. Had his entire life underground been a manipulation? Was he truly just a tool for goblin ambitions? You belong with wizards, the doppelganger insisted, extending a hand. Come home, Harry Potter. Claim your true identity. Leave the darkness behind. For a moment, Harkon wavered. The offer was seductive, acceptance without constant proving, belonging without question, a life in the sun rather than beneath the earth. Then his gaze found Razorclaw in the watching crowd. The old goblin's face showed something Harkan had never seen before, fear. Not fear of Harkan failing, but fear of losing him. Beside Razorclaw stood Silverforge, her expression similarly unguarded for once, revealing concern that went beyond mere alliance or friendship. In that moment, Harkan understood. The trial of spirit wasn't just testing his loyalty to goblin ideals or politics, it was testing his connection to the individuals who had become his true family. Not through blood or birth, but through shared struggle, through teaching and learning, through years of hard-won respect and grudging affection. "You're wrong," Harkan told his doppelganger firmly. "They did more than tolerate me. They challenged me. Respected me. Made me earn my place rather than giving it as a birthright." He straightened, feeling new strength flow through him. "I am Harry Potter by birth. I am Harkan by choice and by trial. I stand between worlds not because I'm trapped there, but because that's where I belong." The doppelganger's confident expression faltered. "You would choose a life of serving creatures who see you as lesser? Who will never truly accept you as one of their own?" "I choose a life serving those who took me in when your world threw me away," Harkan replied. "And I don't serve them, I stand with them. As family. As comrades. As equals." With each word, Harkan stepped closer to his doppelganger, who began to fade and waver. "The Goblin Nation didn't steal my destiny. They helped me forge a new one I chose rather than one thrust upon me by prophecy or fame or the expectations of others." He reached out and placed his hand against the doppelganger's chest. "I don't reject Harry Potter. He's part of me. But Harkan is who I've become. Who I've earned the right to be." The doppelganger shuddered, then dissolved into mist that swirled around Harkan before being absorbed into his body. As it happened, Harkan felt something fundamental shift within him, not a rejection of his wizard heritage, but a true integration of his dual nature. Harry and Harkan, wizard and goblin raised, two halves of a whole that was greater than either could be alone. The chamber remained silent for several heartbeats. Then Ragnarok struck the gong a final time, the sound reverberating with finality. "The trials are complete," he announced. "Harkan Potter has passed all 3 challenges. By the oldest laws of our nation, he is confirmed as War King, protector of goblin interests in the human realm, commander of our warriors should conflict arise, bridge between our worlds." He descended from his platform and approached Harkan, who stood exhausted but upright in the center of the circle. From within his robes, Ragnarok produced a simple circlet of dark metal. "This crown was forged during the last Goblin Rebellion," Ragnarok explained. "It was meant for the War King who would lead us to victory against wizardkind. That conflict ended before a worthy leader emerged." He held the circlet up. "It has waited 3 centuries for the right bearer." He placed the circlet on Harkan's head. The metal was unexpectedly heavy and seemed to adjust itself to fit perfectly. As it settled, Harkan felt a surge of connection to every goblin in the room, not mind reading, but a subtle awareness of their presence, their strengths, their potential in battle. "Kneel," Ragnarok instructed. Harkan knelt on the obsidian floor, head bowed. "Do you swear to uphold the honor of the Goblin Nation in all dealings with the wizard world?" "I swear it," Harkan replied. "Do you swear to protect our interests, our rights, and our people against any who would threaten them?" "I swear it." "Do you swear to lead our warriors with wisdom and courage should conflict arise?" "I swear it." Ragnarok placed a hand on Harkan's shoulder. "Then rise, War King, and be recognized by your people." Harkan stood, and to his astonishment, every goblin in the chamber, including Gornik, dropped to one knee, heads bowed in acknowledgement of his new status. "The ritual recognizes worth beyond blood," Ragnarok said quietly, for Harkan's ears alone. Gornik believed no human could pass all 3 trials. By our oldest laws, he must now accept the judgment of the ritual itself. As the goblins rose, Razorclaw approached, offering Harkan a folded bundle of dark material. It unfurled into a cloak woven of some strange fiber that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The War King's mantle, Razorclaw explained. Spun from shadow spider silk and iron thread, reinforced with protection spells beyond counting. It will turn most wizard hexes and shield your magical signature from detection. As Razorclaw fastened the cloak around Harkin's shoulders, he murmured, "I knew you would survive. Though I admit, you exceeded even my expectations with the elemental magic." "I had a good teacher," Harkin replied with a tired smile. The ceremony concluded with a traditional goblin feast, though Harkin was too exhausted to do more than make a brief appearance before Razorclaw insisted he rest. The magic he'd channeled during the trial had pushed his body to its limits, and recovery would take days. As he lay in his quarters, the events of the past week replaying in his mind, Harkin found himself at a strange crossroads. He had achieved what no human had before, full acceptance within Goblin society at its highest warrior rank. Yet in doing so, he had also fully embraced his dual nature, acknowledging that his wizard heritage was as much a part of him as his goblin training. The Ministry still plotted against goblin rights. Dumbledore still sought to reclaim him for the wizard world. Voldemort's shadow still loomed somewhere in the background of wizard politics. But now, Harkin faced these challenges not as a boy caught between worlds, but as the War King, a position uniquely suited to someone who belonged to both realms and neither. As he drifted toward sleep, Harkin recalled something Silverforge had once told him: "Between worlds isn't nowhere, it's a place of its own, with its own strength." For the first time, he truly understood what she meant. Chapter 3, Worlds Collide. Harkin adjusted the ceremonial armor beneath his War King's cloak, the unfamiliar weight a constant reminder of his new responsibilities. 6 weeks had passed since the ritual of iron and stone, and today marked his first official appearance in the wizard world, not as the long-lost boy who lived, but as the Goblin Nation's designated champion and representative. "The delegation is assembled, War King," Silverforge reported, entering his quarters without knocking. As his newly appointed lieutenant, she'd adopted a slightly more formal tone in official settings, though her familiar irreverence remained in private. "How bad is the panic upstairs?" Harkin asked, securing his twin daggers in their concealed sheaths. "Ragnarok says the Ministry officials are practically hyperventilating," she replied with evident satisfaction. "They expected standard negotiators, not a formal war delegation led by, well, you." Harkin nodded grimly. The escalating tensions between Gringotts and the Ministry had reached a breaking point. Minister Fudge had pushed through preliminary restrictions on goblin commerce while drafting even more severe legislation. In response, Ragnarok had taken the unprecedented step of requesting a formal delegation hearing before the Wisengamot, with the newly appointed War King as chief representative. "Remember the plan," Harkin told Silverforge as they left his quarters. "No matter what happens up there, no matter what they say to me or about me, we maintain diplomatic protocol. This isn't about my history with the wizard world, it's about goblin rights." "Easy for you to say," she muttered. "You're not the one who'll have to physically restrain Grimtooth if some pink-wearing Ministry toad insults you." "That's precisely why you're my lieutenant," Harkin grinned. "Your restraint is legendary." She punched his arm hard enough to leave a bruise, which he took as agreement. The delegation waited at Gringotts' lower entrance, 12 of the bank's most respected warriors and financial leaders, all wearing formal battle dress. The sight would have been intimidating enough to wizards accustomed to seeing goblins only in bankers' attire, but Harkin knew his presence would cause the real shock. Razorclaw stood slightly apart from the group, inspecting his ceremonial acts with unnecessary thoroughness. Since Harkin's elevation to War King, their relationship had shifted. No longer simply mentor and student, they now stood as equals in goblin hierarchy, though Razorclaw remained a trusted advisor. "Final words of wisdom?" Harkin asked, joining him. "Don't get killed," Razorclaw replied dryly. "It would reflect poorly on my training methods. I'll do my best to spare your reputation." Razorclaw's expression softened slightly. "You're walking into the dragon's den, Harkin. Wizards fear what they don't understand, and you will be profoundly incomprehensible to them. A human child they abandoned, returned as a goblin war leader. They will try to reclaim you, control you, or destroy you, possibly all three at once. I'm prepared, Harkan assured him. No, you're not, Razorclaw said bluntly. But you're as ready as you can be. He gripped Harkan's shoulder briefly. Remember who you are, not who they want you to be. Ragnarok approached before Harkan could respond, his expression severe. It's time. The ministry delegation waits at the surface entrance. With a nod to Razorclaw, Harkan took his position at the head of the goblin formation. The procession moved through Gringotts' lower levels, ascending gradually toward the bank's main floor. As they climbed, Harkan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him more heavily than his armor. Today, two worlds that had shaped him would collide, and he stood at the impact point. The wizarding press had somehow gotten wind of the unusual delegation. When Harkan led his goblin warriors through Gringotts' main doors into Diagon Alley, they faced not only the expected ministry escorts but a crowd of reporters and curious onlookers. Flashbulbs popped as photographers captured the unprecedented sight, goblins in battle regalia emerging into daylight, led by a tall human youth wearing the distinctive shadow cloak and iron circlet of a position most wizards thought existed only in history books. "War King!" shouted one reporter. "Is it true you're the long-missing Harry Potter?" "Is Gringotts preparing for armed conflict with the ministry?" called another. Harkan ignored the questions, keeping his expression neutral as he approached the ministry delegation. Three aurors and a pompous-looking wizard in formal robes waited with barely concealed discomfort. "I am Bartemius Crouch, head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation," the pompous wizard announced. "I will escort you to the ministry for your hearing." His eyes lingered on Harkan with obvious suspicion and distaste. "I am Harkan, War King of the Goblin Nation," Harkan replied formally. "My delegation comes in peace but will be heard with respect." The title caused murmurs in the watching crowd. War King was a term from history books, associated with goblin rebellions and conflicts that had shaped wizard-goblin relations for centuries. "Your weapons will need to be surrendered before entering the ministry," Crouch stated, eyeing the various battle axes, short swords, and daggers carried by the delegation. Silverforge growled low in her throat, but Harkan raised a hand to silence her protest. "Our weapons are ceremonial and protected under the Treaty of 1752, which guarantees goblin representatives the right to bear traditional arms during formal proceedings." Crouch's mouth tightened. "Very well. But they will be bound with magic-restricting seals." "Unacceptable," Harkan replied calmly. "The weapons remain unbound, or we return to Gringotts and close the bank until further notice." The threat had immediate effect. Even the most anti-goblin ministry officials understood what a closure of Gringotts would mean for wizarding commerce and stability. Crouch's face reddened, but he nodded stiffly. "Follow me," he ordered, turning abruptly. As they moved through Diagon Alley toward the ministry's visitor entrance, whispers and stares followed them. Harkan walked with the fluid grace of a goblin warrior, his movements precise and economical despite his human frame. The contrast between his human appearance and goblin mannerisms seemed to unsettle the watching wizards even more than the armed goblin contingent behind him. "They're afraid of you," Silverforge noted quietly in gobbledygook. "Not us, you specifically." "Because I represent something they can't categorize," Harkan replied in the same language. "A human who chose the goblin way over theirs. It challenges their assumptions about their own superiority." Silverforge snorted. "Wizards and their fragile egos." The ministry's visitor entrance, disguised as a telephone booth, required them to enter in small groups. Harkan went first with Silverforge and two senior goblin representatives, followed by the others in tight formation. The booth descended into the ministry's atrium, where their appearance caused immediate commotion. Ministry workers stopped in their tracks, gaping at the unprecedented sight of armed goblins striding through their headquarters. Security wizards moved to intercept them but were waved back by Crouch, who looked increasingly unhappy with his escort duties. The Wisengamot has convened in courtroom 10, he informed Harkin stiffly. It's highly unusual for Goblin representatives to address the full court. These are unusual times, Harkin replied. As they descended to level 10, Harkin sensed the growing tension in his delegation. Goblins rarely ventured this deep into the ministry, a place historically associated with anti-goblin legislation and punitive measures against their kind. Silverforge walked so close to his side their arms nearly touched, her hand never straying far from her weapon. "Stay sharp," Harkin murmured to his delegation in gobbledygook. "But remember, we're here to prevent conflict, not start it." The massive doors to courtroom 10 stood open, revealing a cavernous space with rising tiers of seats filled with wizards and witches in plum-colored robes. The full Wisengamot had indeed assembled, along with ministry department heads, reporters, and various officials. At the center stood a single chair facing the chief warlock's podium. One chair, Harkin noted, they'd expected him to come alone, or perhaps with one goblin representative. The presence of a full war delegation had not been anticipated. "Wait," Harkin instructed his delegation as they reached the doorway. He turned to Crouch. "My representatives will require appropriate seating." "There wasn't time to," Crouch began. "Then we will wait while appropriate accommodations are made," Harkin interrupted firmly. "The Goblin Nation will not be treated as an afterthought." A tense silence followed as Crouch glanced toward the podium, where Minister Fudge was engaged in hurried conversation with several Wisengamot members. Finally, a court official hastily conjured a row of seats at floor level. Harkin nodded to his delegation, and they proceeded into the courtroom in perfect formation. The whispers that had followed them through the ministry became a steady murmur as the assembled wizards took in the sight. Harkin led his warriors to the provided seats, positioning Silverforge and his financial advisors closest to the central chair he would occupy. And then, looking up to the highest tier of seats, Harkin saw him, Albus Dumbledore, in his capacity as chief warlock, watching the proceedings with unreadable eyes behind half-moon spectacles. Their gazes locked for a brief moment, and Harkin felt a subtle probe against his mental defenses, an attempt at legilimency so light it might have gone unnoticed by someone without goblin training in mind magic. Harkin reinforced his shields without changing expression, and the probe withdrew immediately. Minister Fudge stood, calling for order. "This emergency session of the Wisengamot is now in session. We are here to address the concerns raised by the Goblin Nation regarding recent regulatory measures." He paused, clearly thrown by the unexpected formality of the delegation. We welcome the representative of Gringotts Bank to present these concerns." Harkin stood, his War King's cloak shifting like liquid shadow around him. "I am Harkin, War King of the Goblin Nation, appointed by ritual and right to represent our interests in times of conflict." The declaration sent another wave of whispers through the courtroom. Fudge's face paled slightly. "War King," he repeated. "Surely that's an archaic title with no modern, it is an ancient title with very modern implications," Harkin interrupted. "Its bestowal indicates the Goblin Nation's belief that our treaties with wizard-kind stand in grave peril." From his elevated position, Dumbledore leaned forward slightly. "If I may, Minister. Perhaps we should allow the War King to explain the specific concerns that prompted this unprecedented delegation." Fudge nodded nervously, and Harkin inclined his head in acknowledgement of Dumbledore's intervention, though his expression remained cool. "The Ministry's recent regulations restricting goblin commerce and property rights violate no fewer than 16 clauses of the Treaty of 1752, Harkin began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. The proposed legislation regarding dangerous artifacts classification would effectively criminalize traditional goblin craftsmanship. Furthermore, the suggested inspection regime for Gringotts vaults represents a direct violation of our chartered independence." He continued methodically, citing specific legal precedents and treaty provisions with an expertise that visibly surprised many of the watching wizards. For 20 minutes, Harkin dismantled the ministry's legal position piece by piece, demonstrating the accumulated consequences of their regulatory agenda. "In short," he concluded, should these measures proceed, the Goblin nation would have no choice but to consider the Treaty of 1752 void, with all that entails for wizard-goblin relations. The threat wasn't stated explicitly, but it hung in the air nonetheless. Gringotts would close. The wizard economy would collapse within weeks. And centuries of carefully maintained peace between the species would be at risk. Fudge mopped his brow with a handkerchief. These are serious allegations, Mr. War King. But surely you understand the security concerns driving these measures? After recent incidents involving dangerous magical artifacts, the Ministry has a responsibility to protect its citizens. The Ministry has a responsibility to honor its treaties, Harkin countered. And to distinguish between legitimate security concerns and thinly veiled attempts to further restrict goblin rights. From the second tier of seats, a simpering voice interjected. Perhaps the War King could explain how a human child came to hold such an unusual position among goblins. Harkin turned to face Dolores Umbridge, who smiled sweetly while her eyes remained cold and calculating. My personal history is irrelevant to these proceedings, Harkin stated flatly. On the contrary, Umbridge pressed. It seems highly relevant that the goblins have appointed a wizard-born child as their representative. Particularly when that child bears a striking resemblance to a certain missing person of great significance to our world. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Many wizards were openly staring at Harkin's forehead, where his hair partially covered his lightning scar. Madam Umbridge raises an interesting point, Fudge said, clearly relieved to shift the focus away from goblin rights. There have been rumors, most disturbing rumors, that you might be Harry Potter, a wizard child who disappeared under mysterious circumstances 8 years ago. Harkin had anticipated this line of attack. In fact, he'd counted on it. The Ministry's obsession with his identity would distract them from the legal strength of the goblin position, potentially leading to concessions they might otherwise resist. I was born Harry Potter, he acknowledged, causing a sensation in the courtroom. I was abandoned by Albus Dumbledore on Gringotts steps at age 5. The Goblin Nation took me in, raised me as one of their own, and recognized my value to their society. I hold dual citizenship under Section 7 of the Magical Beings Integration Act of 1697, which remains binding law despite the Ministry's convenient neglect of its provisions. Cameras flashed as reporters frantically scribbled notes. The boy who lived, returned as a goblin champion, it was the story of the decade. Dumbledore stood, his expression grave. If I may address the War King's statement regarding his abandonment. Fudge nodded, eager to see how Dumbledore would handle this public accusation. 8 years ago, Dumbledore began, I made a terrible error in judgment based on false information. A prophecy, later discovered to be planted by those with malicious intent, suggested Harry Potter would bring destruction to our world if raised within it. Believing I was preventing a greater tragedy, I removed him from Wizarding Society, intending for the Ministry to find him quickly and place him with a magical family outside Britain. He looked directly at Harkin. I have spent years searching for you, Harry, trying to right my grievous mistake. Your reappearance, especially in such an unexpected capacity, is both a relief and a cause for serious reflection on my part. The courtroom had gone completely silent, all eyes moving between Dumbledore and Harkin. My name, Harkin said coldly, is Harkin. And your personal reflections, while perhaps eventually relevant to me as an individual, have no bearing on the legal matters before this court. The Goblin Nation's grievances stand independent of my history. Quite right, interjected an elderly witch whom Harkin recognized as Amelia Bones, head of magical law enforcement. Whatever the circumstances of War King Harkin's upbringing, the treaties with the Goblin Nation remain binding. We should address the specific legal concerns raised before addressing other matters. Fudge looked disappointed at this return to substantive issues, but the more serious members of the Wizengamot nodded in agreement with Bones. For the next 2 hours, the session became a complex legal debate, with Harkin and his goblin advisors methodically challenging each aspect of the Ministry's regulatory agenda. It quickly became clear that many Wizengamot members had not fully understood the implications of the legislation they'd been asked to support. As the discussion progressed, Harkan noticed a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. What had begun as suspicion and hostility toward the Goblin delegation gradually transformed into reluctant respect, at least among the more thoughtful wizards present. Harkan's command of magical law, combined with his unique position between the two societies, made his arguments difficult to dismiss. Finally, Fudge called for a recess to allow the Wizengamot to confer privately. As the wizards filed out, many continued to stare at Harkan with undisguised curiosity. Silverforge leaned close once they were alone. "You've impressed them," she murmured in gobbledygook. "They expected a barbarian with a grudge. You gave them a legal scholar with an unassailable position." "Ragnarok's strategy," Harkan acknowledged. "Surprise is our greatest weapon. But this is just the opening move. Dumbledore keeps watching you," she observed. "He'll want a private conversation." "I'm counting on it," Harkan replied. "But on my terms, not his." The Wizengamot's private deliberation stretched longer than anticipated. As they waited, an unexpected visitor approached the Goblin delegation, a round-faced young wizard about Harkan's age, looking simultaneously nervous and determined. "Excuse me," he said politely. "My name is Neville Longbottom. I was wondering if I might have a word with the War King." The goblins tensed, hands moving subtly toward weapons, but Harkan signaled them to stand down. He recognized the name immediately, the other child who might have fulfilled the prophecy about Voldemort, the one the Daily Prophet had mentioned in connection with you-know-whose memory. "Speak freely, Neville Longbottom," Harkan replied, studying the boy with interest. Neville swallowed visibly. "I just wanted to say, well, I understand. About Dumbledore, I mean." He lowered his voice. "After you disappeared, he sort of shifted all his attention to me. Said I might be the one from the prophecy instead. It's been difficult." Harkan hadn't expected this. "You're telling me this why?" "Because I think you deserve to know you're not the only one who's been moved around like a chess piece," Neville said with surprising firmness. "And because, well, something's happening at Hogwarts. Something bad. I've been trying to tell the adults, but no one listens to me. But they might listen to you." Before Harkan could press for details, the Wizengamot members began returning to the courtroom. Neville stepped back, whispering hurriedly, "Find me after. It's about you-know-who." The session resumed with Fudge looking considerably less confident than before. After careful consideration of the legal arguments presented, the Wizengamot has decided to form a special committee to review the proposed regulations in light of existing treaty obligations. Implementation of the current draft legislation will be suspended pending this review. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a significant concession, one that would give Gringotts time to negotiate more favorable terms. Harkan nodded in acknowledgement, careful not to appear too satisfied. "The Goblin Nation accepts this intermediary step," he stated formally. "We will appoint representatives to work with this committee to ensure treaty compliance." Fudge cleared his throat. "There is, however, another matter the Wizengamot wishes to address. The question of your identity and status, War King Harkan." "Here it comes," Harkan thought. "As you have confirmed you were born Harry Potter, certain legal questions arise regarding your guardianship, education, and status under wizard law," Fudge continued. "As a wizard-born minor, there are concerns about the circumstances of your adoption by the Goblin Nation." Silverforge tensed beside him, but Harkan remained calm. "Minister Fudge, I hold dual citizenship under laws older than the ministry itself. My status was formalized through Goblin rituals recognized by the Treaty of 1752 as having binding magical force. Any attempt to interfere with my position would constitute a direct violation of that treaty." "Even so," Umbridge interjected sweetly, "surely a young wizard belongs with his own kind. For education if nothing else. Hogwarts would welcome you, I'm certain." Before Harkan could respond, Dumbledore rose again. "While I would indeed welcome Harry, Harkan, at Hogwarts should he choose to attend, I must caution the Wizengamot against any attempt to compel his return to wizard society. Such an action would not only violate the treaties so thoroughly reviewed today but would repeat the very error I made 8 years ago, imposing our will upon him without regard for his own choices. The statement surprised Harkan. He'd expected Dumbledore to lead the effort to reclaim him, not defend his right to remain with the Goblins. The War King's status is not subject to ministry jurisdiction, Dumbledore continued. His dual citizenship is protected by laws predating our current governmental structure. I suggest we focus on the substantive policy issues raised today rather than attempting to undo 8 years of his life. Fudge looked deeply disappointed but nodded reluctantly. Very well. This session is concluded. The special committee will convene next week to begin reviewing the regulations. As the formal proceedings ended, the courtroom erupted in activity. Reporters pressed forward, calling questions. Ministry officials clustered in small groups, discussing the unexpected developments. Through it all, Harkan maintained his composure, directing his delegation toward the exit with quiet authority. In the corridor outside, they found Neville waiting nervously. Silverforge immediately positioned herself between the young wizard and Harkan, her hand resting on her weapon. "You mentioned Voldemort," Harkan said without preamble, ignoring Neville's flinch at the name. Neville nodded, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Last year, there was this incident with a diary that had you-know-whose memories in it. It nearly killed a student. Dumbledore destroyed it, but he was really shaken afterward. Said something about pieces of his soul still existing." Harkan exchanged a significant look with Silverforge. Soul magic was among the darkest arts known to goblins, considered an abomination against the natural order. "There's more," Neville continued urgently. "This year, Hogwarts is hosting the Triwizard Tournament. But someone tampered with the Goblet of Fire and entered my name, even though I'm too young to compete. Dumbledore thinks someone's trying to get to me, someone working for you-know-who. And you believe this concerns us how?" Silverforge asked skeptically. "Because one of our professors isn't who he claims to be," Neville explained, his voice dropping further. "Professor Moody, he's supposed to be this famous Auror, but he's been acting strange. I caught him searching Dumbledore's office when he thought everyone was at the Yule Ball. And he's been asking me questions about the Philosopher's Stone that Dumbledore's keeping at Hogwarts." Harkan's interest sharpened. The Philosopher's Stone was legendary even among goblins, a source of immortality and unlimited gold. If Voldemort or his followers sought it, the implications were serious. "Why come to me with this?" Harkan asked. "Why not Dumbledore?" "I tried," Neville said miserably. "He listens politely, then tells me not to worry. But I saw your face when you talked about being abandoned, you know what it's like when adults don't take you seriously." He straightened slightly. "Besides, the goblins have always believed me. Bill Weasley works with them, and he's the only adult who really listens." "Bill Weasley," Silverforge confirmed quietly to Harkan. "Cursebreaker. Respected by our Egyptian division." Harkan considered the information carefully. If Voldemort was making moves to return, if he sought immortality through the Philosopher's Stone, it represented a threat to both wizard and goblin societies. And Harkan's unique position might allow him to investigate where others could not. "I need to speak with Ragnarok and the council before deciding how to proceed," Harkan told Neville. "How can I contact you securely?" Relief flooded Neville's face. "I have this," he said, pulling out what looked like an ordinary galleon. "Hermione Granger enchanted it. It lets members of our study group communicate." He pressed the coin into Harkan's hand, explaining how the serial numbers changed to show messages. "If you decide to help, just send a time and place to meet." Before they could discuss further, a commotion at the end of the corridor announced Dumbledore's approach, surrounded by reporters and ministry officials. Harkan quickly pocketed the coin. "I'll consider what you've told me," he promised Neville, who nodded and slipped away as Dumbledore drew nearer. The old wizard's eyes tracked Neville's departure with interest before settling on Harkan. "War King, he greeted formally. "Might I request a brief private audience before you depart?" "You may request," Harkin replied coolly. "I will consider it alongside other priorities." If Dumbledore was offended by the dismissive tone, he didn't show it. "Of course. Perhaps tomorrow, then. Neutral ground of your choosing." Harkin nodded curtly. "The Leaky Cauldron. Private room. Midday." "I look forward to it," Dumbledore said, a hint of genuine emotion breaking through his diplomatic facade. "There is much I wish to explain." "Explanations come 8 years too late, Headmaster," Harkin replied. "But I will hear them nonetheless." As Dumbledore bowed slightly and withdrew, Silverforge murmured, "You're actually meeting him? Alone?" "Not alone," Harkin corrected. "You'll be with me. And not just to hear his explanations. I have questions about what Neville shared regarding Voldemort." She studied his expression. "You're taking the boy's concerns seriously. Aren't you? The Philosopher's Stone, a possible imposter at Hogwarts, soul magic, these aren't typical school problems." Harkin's eyes narrowed. "Besides, Neville has nothing to gain by inventing such a story. And everything he described aligns with the rumors we've been hearing from our wizard contacts." They rejoined the Goblin delegation, who had maintained a protective formation nearby. As they made their way back through the Ministry, Harkin's mind worked rapidly, assessing the day's developments and planning his next moves. The Wizengamot session had gone largely as expected: initial hostility, followed by reluctant recognition of the legal strength of the Goblin position, ending with a temporary compromise. But Neville's information had introduced an unexpected variable, one that potentially changed the entire equation. If Voldemort was making moves to return, it affected far more than Goblin Ministry relations. It represented an existential threat to the fragile peace between magical species that had held for centuries. The last Wizarding War had seen goblins caught in the crossfire, their neutrality ignored by Death Eaters who viewed all part humans as beneath contempt. As War King, Harkin's duty extended beyond Gringotts' immediate interests to the broader security of the Goblin nation. And as Harry Potter, a title he might reject but couldn't escape, he carried another kind of responsibility, one tied to the parents he barely remembered and the scar that marked him as Voldemort's nemesis. For the first time, these dual aspects of his identity didn't feel like a contradiction. Instead, they seemed to align toward a common purpose, one that transcended the artificial boundaries between wizard and goblin concerns. "It's a trap," Gornick declared flatly, pacing the council chamber where Gringotts' leadership had convened to hear Harkin's report. "The Longbottom boy was obviously sent by Dumbledore to manipulate you. To draw you back into wizard affairs that don't concern us." "Neville didn't strike me as capable of such deception," Harkin countered. His fear was genuine, as was his frustration at not being taken seriously. "Even if the boy believes what he told you," Ragnock interjected, "the question remains, does this potential threat to the wizard world justify goblin involvement?" The council members murmured among themselves. Ever since Harkin's return from the Ministry, Gringotts had been abuzz with discussions about the Wizengamot session and its implications. News of Harry Potter's reappearance as the Goblin War King had spread through the wizarding press like wildfire, generating intense public interest and debate. The Dark Lord's return wouldn't affect only wizards, Razorclaw pointed out. "Last time, dozens of our kind died when Death Eaters targeted our outposts. Voldemort considers all non-human magical beings inferior, potential slaves at best, vermin to be exterminated at worst. That's wizard politics," Gornick insisted. "Let them handle their own dark wizards. Our concern should be protecting our interests during the regulatory review we've just negotiated." Harkin listened to the debate with growing impatience. The council was missing the strategic implications, focusing on immediate concerns rather than long-term threats. "The Philosopher's Stone changes everything," he finally interrupted. "If Voldemort acquires it, if he achieves immortality and unlimited gold, he'll become a threat no treaty or regulatory compromise can address." The chamber fell silent as the goblins considered this argument. As bankers and warriors, they understood the fundamental power that would come from controlling such an artifact. "What do you propose, War King?" Ragnarok asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp with interest. "I meet with Dumbledore tomorrow as planned," Harkin replied. "I verify Neville's claims about the stone and this potential imposter. Then, if the threat is confirmed, I lead a small team to Hogwarts to investigate directly." "Enter the wizard school uninvited?" Gornik scoffed. "They'd consider it an act of war." "Not uninvited," Harkan corrected. "As I understand it, the Triwizard Tournament has brought foreign delegations to Hogwarts. One more unusual group would not seem out of place during such an international gathering." Ragnarok stroked his long fingers thoughtfully. "A bold approach. But with significant risk. If you're wrong about this threat, we would appear to be interfering in wizard affairs without justification. And if I'm right, we prevent a catastrophe that would affect both our worlds." Harkan met Ragnarok's gaze steadily. "That's the purpose of the War King position, to identify threats to the Goblin nation before they become unmanageable." After further discussion, the council narrowly approved Harkin's plan, with several conditions. His team would be small, their presence at Hogwarts would be negotiated with Dumbledore rather than forced, and their primary mission would be information gathering, not direct intervention. As the council disbanded, Razorclaw pulled Harkan aside. "You're playing a dangerous game, using your position to investigate a threat to both societies. Some on the council fear you're being drawn back to your wizard roots." "My loyalty is to the Goblin nation," Harkan assured him. "I know that," Razorclaw replied. "But your vision of Goblin interests may be broader than those like Gornik can accept. Be careful not to outpace the council's support." The warning was well taken. Harkan had won approval for his plan by the narrowest margin, with Gornik's faction arguing forcefully against what they saw as unnecessary entanglement in wizard problems. If his investigation at Hogwarts went poorly, his newly established authority as War King could be undermined. Later that evening, Harkin met with Silver Forge to select their team for the potential Hogwarts mission. "We need specialists," he explained as they reviewed personnel files in his quarters. "A cursebreaker, a lore expert familiar with soul magic, and warriors we can trust absolutely. Grimtooth is the best curse detector we have," Silverforge noted reluctantly. "Though I'd sooner trust a hungry dragon." "No," Harkan decided firmly. "His skills aren't worth his unpredictability. Sharpclaw from the Egyptian division has nearly as much experience and none of Grimtooth's personal grudges against me." By midnight, they had assembled their team, Sharpclaw for magical detection and curse-breaking, Ironheart for lore expertise, and 2 elite warriors from Harkin's personal guard. With Silverforge as his lieutenant, the group would be small enough to move quickly but capable enough to handle most threats. "Get some rest," Harkin told Silverforge as they finished their planning. "Tomorrow with Dumbledore will be challenging enough without adding exhaustion." She lingered at the door, uncharacteristically hesitant. "This is different from our usual missions. You're not just the War King investigating a threat to goblins. You're Harry Potter potentially confronting the wizard who killed your parents." Harkan had been avoiding that particular thought. "Those identities can't be separated anymore," he acknowledged. "After today's Wisengamot session, the entire wizard world knows who I am, both of who I am. I need to find a way to use that dual identity as strength, not weakness." Silverforge studied him with her piercing golden eyes. "Just don't forget who your real allies are," she said finally. "Wizards will try to claim you, to pull you back into their world with talk of destiny and belonging. But they discarded you once. We're the ones who've stood beside you all these years." "I know," Harkan assured her. "And that won't change, regardless of what comes next." After she left, Harkin stood at the window of his quarters, looking up at the narrow shaft that allowed a glimpse of night sky from his underground home. Stars glittered in the small rectangle of darkness, distant and cold. Tomorrow he would meet with Dumbledore, the man who had shaped his fate so dramatically, first by leaving him with the Dursleys after his parents' murder, then by abandoning him on Gringotts steps. The man who claimed to have searched for him for years, who now spoke of prophecies and false information and grievous mistakes. Part of Harkan, the part that would always be the abandoned 5-year-old Harry, wanted answers, maybe even justice. But the War King couldn't afford such personal indulgences. The Goblin nation needed him focused on the larger threat. If Voldemort sought the Philosopher's Stone, if he had agents within Hogwarts itself, the stakes extended far beyond old grudges or personal history. Harkan touched the lightning scar on his forehead, a connection to a past he barely remembered and a wizard world that now viewed him as simultaneously hero and traitor, savior and aberration. Whatever came next, he could no longer avoid the collision between his two identities. The War King and the boy who lived would face Voldemort together, along with whatever consequences that entailed for both the worlds that had shaped him. The private room at the Leaky Cauldron was warded with both goblin and wizard privacy spells, creating a neutral space where even the most sensitive conversations would remain confidential. Harkan arrived early with Silver Forge, carefully inspecting the room before Dumbledore's arrival. "He'll try to separate us," Silver Forge predicted as she checked for listening charms. "Claim the need for a personal conversation. Wizard sentimentality." "Probably," Harkan agreed. "But you stay regardless. The days when Albus Dumbledore could dictate the terms of my life are long past." When Dumbledore entered precisely at noon, he came alone, dressed in more subdued robes than his usual flamboyant style. His eyes took in Silverforge's presence with mild surprise but no objection. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Harkan," he said, taking the seat opposite them. "May I call you that? I understand it's your preferred name now." "It's the name I earned," Harkan replied neutrally. "But you may use it." Dumbledore nodded. "I owe you explanations, more than can be adequately provided in a single conversation, I fear. But I will start with the most pressing, why I left you at Gringotts that day." "You mentioned a false prophecy," Harkan prompted, keeping his voice steady despite the emotions stirring beneath the surface. "Yes." Dumbledore sighed heavily. "After Voldemort's fall, when you were living with your aunt and uncle, I received what appeared to be a legitimate prophecy from a trusted source. It suggested that if you remained in wizarding society, you would eventually bring catastrophic destruction, that the trauma of your parents' murder and your own survival had created a dangerous instability in your magic." He spread his hands. "I believed I faced an impossible choice: remove you from our world, or risk the lives of countless others. I chose what I thought was the lesser evil, intending for the Ministry to find you quickly and place you with a magical family outside Britain, where you could be raised away from the pressures of fame and the lingering threat of Voldemort's followers. But you didn't inform the Ministry where you'd left me," Harkan pointed out, his voice hardening. "You simply walked away." "A terrible error in judgment," Dumbledore acknowledged. "I feared that if I directly involved Ministry officials, word would leak to the press, and you would never escape the public scrutiny I was trying to protect you from. Instead, I placed a monitoring charm that should have alerted certain trusted contacts when you were found." His expression grew troubled. "That charm never activated. I can only assume the goblin wards neutralized it." "They did," Silver Forge confirmed bluntly. "Standard procedure for unknown magic on bank property." Dumbledore nodded sadly. "By the time I realized something had gone wrong, you had vanished completely. I've spent years searching, using every resource at my disposal." "When did you discover the prophecy was false?" Harkan asked, the question that had bothered him most. "Only 3 years ago," Dumbledore replied. "The source, a witch who had occasionally demonstrated genuine seer abilities, was found to be under the Imperius curse. Subsequent investigation revealed she had been controlled by a Death Eater seeking to remove you from the protection I had established." The explanation aligned with what little Harkan had pieced together from Wizard News and Gringotts intelligence. It was plausible, perhaps even true. But it didn't erase 8 years of abandonment or the fundamental arrogance of Dumbledore's original decision. "You took it upon yourself to decide my fate," Harkan said quietly. "Without consultation, without oversight, without real understanding of the consequences. The result was 8 years of believing I had been discarded by the wizard world. Yes, Dumbledore agreed simply. A burden of guilt I carry every day. And yet, Harkan continued, his eyes never leaving Dumbledore's, after discovering this terrible mistake, you transferred your attentions to Neville Longbottom, the other child who might have fulfilled the original prophecy about Voldemort's fall. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. You've spoken with Neville. He found me after the Wisengamot session. He believes there's an impostor at Hogwarts seeking the Philosopher's Stone. He also mentioned incidents involving Voldemort's diary and pieces of his soul. Are these claims accurate? The abrupt change of subject clearly caught Dumbledore off guard. He studied Harkan with new intensity, reassessing the young War King's priorities and interests. They are, he confirmed after a moment's hesitation. Though the situation is more complex than Neville understands. The diary was a Horcrux, an object containing a fragment of Voldemort's soul. I believe he created several such anchors to prevent true death. Soul shards, Silverforge hissed in disgust. Abomination magic. Indeed, Dumbledore agreed gravely. As for the impostor, I've had my suspicions about Alastor Moody for some time. His behavior has been inconsistent with the man I've known for decades. However, proving this without alerting the impostor has been challenging. And the Philosopher's Stone? Harkan pressed. Is it really at Hogwarts? Dumbledore hesitated again, clearly weighing how much to reveal. It was, he finally admitted. After an attempt to steal it from Gringotts last year, an attempt I believe was orchestrated by Voldemort or his followers, Nicholas Flamel and I agreed it should be moved to Hogwarts temporarily. However, following recent concerns, I've relocated it once more. Where? Harkan demanded. That, I cannot tell you, Dumbledore replied firmly. Not without greater certainty of your intentions. Harkan leaned forward. My intentions, Headmaster, are to prevent Voldemort from returning to power, something that threatens both wizard and goblin societies. The Goblin Nation has authorized me to investigate this threat, potentially in cooperation with you if our interests align. Surprise flickered across Dumbledore's face. The Goblins have approved direct intervention in what many would consider a wizard matter. That's unexpected. The War King position exists precisely for such situations, Harkan explained. When threats transcend the usual boundaries between our societies. I see. Dumbledore's blue eyes gleamed with new interest. And what form would this cooperation take? My team and I would come to Hogwarts, ostensibly as additional security for the Triwizard Tournament. We would identify this impostor, determine what they know about Voldemort's plans, and coordinate our response accordingly. Dumbledore considered the proposal carefully. Your presence at Hogwarts would certainly cause a sensation. The boy who lived, returned as a Goblin War leader, the press would be unmanageable. I'm not suggesting a public visit, Harkan clarified. My team would enter discreetly, operating behind the scenes while you maintain the focus on the tournament. And once you've confirmed whether Neville's concerns are valid, then we decide our next steps based on what we discover. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment. You've changed remarkably from the child I remember, Harkan. There's a confidence, a purpose to you that few wizards your age possess. Goblin training values competence over coddling, Harkan replied dryly. So I see. Dumbledore nodded slowly. Very well. I agree to this cooperation, with conditions. Your team must remain under my authority while at Hogwarts, and any actions taken must be coordinated with me first. Unacceptable, Silverforge interjected sharply. The War King answers to the Goblin Council, not wizard authority. A compromise, then, Harkan suggested. My team operates independently but shares all information. Neither side acts unilaterally unless immediate danger demands it. After further negotiation, they reached an agreement. Harkan's team would arrive at Hogwarts in 3 days, using the confusion of the Triwizard Tournament's second task as cover. They would have access to restricted areas of the castle to conduct their investigation but would keep Dumbledore informed of their findings. "There is one more matter we should discuss," Dumbledore said as their meeting concluded. "The original prophecy, the one that led Voldemort to attack your parents. You should know its contents before potentially confronting him or his agents." Harkan tensed. He'd heard vague references to this prophecy during his education at Gringotts but never its specific wording. Dumbledore recited it from memory, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "This is why he came for me as a baby," Harkan said quietly. "Why my parents died." "Yes," Dumbledore confirmed. "Voldemort learned only the first part of the prophecy, enough to identify you, or potentially Neville, as a threat. He chose you, and in doing so, fulfilled the prophecy himself by marking you." His eyes flicked to Harkan's scar. "And now you think it refers to me definitively, not Neville," Harkan concluded. "Because of this mark." "I do," Dumbledore acknowledged. "Though prophecies are notoriously subject to interpretation. What matters is that Voldemort believes it refers to you. Should he return to power, he will seek to destroy you to eliminate the threat you represent." Harkan absorbed this information without visible reaction, though internally his mind raced with implications. A prophecy had shaped his life before he was even born, had led to his parents' murder, his placement with the Dursleys, ultimately even his abandonment and adoption by the Goblins. "Knowledge is preferable to ignorance," he finally said. "But I don't accept that my fate is predetermined by words spoken before my birth. I'll face Voldemort if necessary, not because prophecy demands it, but because he threatens both worlds I call home." Dumbledore's expression showed something like approval. "A mature perspective. Though I caution against dismissing prophecy entirely. Magic has its own patterns and purposes, often beyond our understanding." As they prepared to leave, Dumbledore made one final comment: "Whatever you discover at Hogwarts, Harkan, remember that you have a place there if you ever wish to claim it. Your parents paid your tuition at birth. A wand and education await you, should you desire them." "I have all the education I require," Harkan replied coolly. "And goblin magic serves me well enough without a wand." But as he and Silverforge departed, Harkan couldn't entirely dismiss the suggestion. He had mastered goblin magic through years of rigorous training, but wizard magic, his birthright, remained largely unexplored territory. If he truly stood between worlds, perhaps he needed to understand both magical traditions to fulfill his potential. Such considerations, however, would have to wait. The immediate priority was Hogwarts and the threat lurking within its walls, a threat that might herald Voldemort's return and a new era of darkness for both wizard and goblin societies. Hogwarts Castle loomed against the night sky, its many towers and turrets silhouetted by moonlight reflecting off the Black Lake. Harkan stood at the edge of the Forbidden Forest with his team, studying the ancient structure with mixed emotions. In another life, this might have been his school, a place of learning and belonging rather than a mission target. But those reflections were luxuries he couldn't afford. They had a job to do. "Remember the plan," he instructed his team quietly. "We enter through the passage Dumbledore provided, establish our base in the unused section of the East Tower, and begin surveillance immediately. Priority targets are the imposter posing as Moody and any areas showing signs of dark magic consistent with Horcruxes." Sharpclaw, the Cursebreaker, checked his detection instruments one final time. "The wards are ancient and complex. If they react to goblin presence, we'll have minutes at most to explain ourselves before the castle's defenses activate." "Dumbledore has temporarily modified the recognition parameters," Harkan assured him. "But stay alert nonetheless." They moved swiftly through the forest, avoiding the main paths where tournament spectators might still be wandering after the day's events. The second task, which had involved champions rescuing hostages from the lake, had concluded hours earlier, but the castle remained more active than usual with foreign visitors and ministry officials. The secret passage Dumbledore had revealed opened through a weathered stone outcropping near the lake's edge. It led them through narrow, damp tunnels that clearly predated the castle itself, eventually emerging in a disused storeroom on the ground floor. "Extraordinary defensive architecture," Ironheart murmured, his lorekeeper's eyes cataloging the castle's magical structures. The founders built on existing ley lines, creating a self-reinforcing magical matrix. No wonder Hogwarts is considered impenetrable. "Focus," Silverforge reminded him. "We're not here for academic appreciation." They made their way through deserted corridors, following Dumbledore's directions to avoid the more populated areas of the castle. Occasionally they froze at the sound of approaching footsteps or voices, but their goblin-trained stealth served them well. Their designated base in the East Tower proved adequate if Spartan, a circular room with dusty furniture and narrow windows overlooking the grounds. Sharpclaw immediately began setting up detection equipment, while the warriors established perimeter wards to alert them of approaching humans. "I'll make contact with Neville," Harkin decided, retrieving the enchanted galleon from his pocket. He sent a simple message using the code Neville had explained, EW7M, East Wing, 7th floor, midnight. While waiting for the appointed meeting time, Harkin studied the map Dumbledore had provided, memorizing the castle's layout and identifying potential trouble spots. Moody's office was located in the Defense Against the Dark Arts Tower, while the most significant concentrations of dark magic detection should appear in the dungeons and the 7th floor corridor, according to Dumbledore's notes. "If there's an imposter," Silverforge mused, examining the map over Harkin's shoulder, "why hasn't Dumbledore simply confronted him? He's supposedly the most powerful wizard alive." "Politics," Harkin replied. Without proof, accusing a famous Auror of being an imposter would damage Dumbledore's already contested position. "The Ministry has been trying to undermine his authority for months. So he uses us instead," she concluded sourly. "If we're caught, we're just rogue goblins trespassing. If we succeed, he claims the victory." "Perhaps," Harkin acknowledged. "But our interests align regardless of his motivations. If Voldemort returns to power, the Goblin Nation will face far worse than Ministry regulations." At midnight, Harkin and Silverforge made their way to the designated meeting spot, moving silently through the sleeping castle. They found Neville already waiting, accompanied by two others, a bushy-haired witch and a tall, red-headed wizard, both about Neville's age. "I brought help," Neville explained hurriedly, seeing Harkin's narrowed eyes. "This is Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley. They've been helping me investigate Moody. I trust them completely." Silverforge's hand moved to her weapon, but Harkin signaled her to stand down. "Explain why I shouldn't turn around right now," he told Neville coolly. "Our agreement was for a private meeting." "Because we have proof," the girl, Hermione, interjected, her voice low but determined. "We've been tracking Professor Moody's movements on a special map that shows everyone in the castle. Except sometimes he appears as Bartemius Crouch Jr., a Death Eater who's supposed to be dead. And my brother works for Gringotts," Ron added. "Bill says the goblins are honorable. If you're their war king, you'll want to see what we've found." Harkin studied them carefully. The girl showed intelligence and conviction, the red-haired boy a mixture of nervousness and stubborn determination. Neither appeared to be lying. "Show me this map," he decided. Ron produced a worn piece of parchment, whispering an activation phrase, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Ink spread across the surface, forming an intricate diagram of Hogwarts and tiny labeled dots representing every person within. "Remarkable magic," Silverforge murmured despite herself, examining the map with professional appreciation. "It was created by students decades ago," Hermione explained. "Including Harry Potter's father, actually." Harkin ignored the personal connection, focusing instead on the map's practical value. "Where is Moody now?" "His office," Ron replied, pointing to a dot labeled Bartemius Crouch Jr., in the defense tower. See? That's not Moody's name. And we've seen him drinking from a flask every hour on the hour, classic sign of polyjuice potion. He's been asking questions about the third task, Neville added. Specifically about what protections will be in place. And I caught him searching Dumbledore's office when everyone was at the Yule Ball. What about the Philosopher's Stone? Harkan asked. Dumbledore claims he's moved it from Hogwarts. The three students exchanged glances. He told us the same thing, Hermione confirmed. But we found this in Crouch's, office when he was supervising detention. She handed Harkan a crumpled piece of parchment. It's a partial translation of an ancient text about transferring consciousness into objects. We think it's related to how Voldemort survived when his body was destroyed. Harkan studied the parchment, recognizing elements of soul magic similar to what Goblin lore described as essence anchoring, a forbidden technique for achieving a form of immortality. This aligns with what we know about Horcruxes, he said, passing the parchment to Ironheart when they returned to their base. The imposter is researching how Voldemort survived and possibly how to restore him to a physical form. The tournament, Silverforge suggested. It provides perfect cover, international attention, relaxed security, hundreds of visitors. An ideal opportunity for an operation requiring complex magic without detection. Harkan nodded in agreement. We need to confront this Crouch directly. Tonight, while the castle sleeps. His team prepared quickly, checking weapons and reinforcing protective charms. Goblin battle strategy emphasized swift, decisive action rather than prolonged engagement. They would capture the imposter, extract information, and determine the full extent of Voldemort's plans. Using the Marauder's map as a guide, they navigated to Moody's office, avoiding the few staff members still patrolling the corridors. Outside the office door, Sharpclaw detected complex locking and alarm wards. Multiple triggers, he whispered, tracing the magical patterns with a specialized tool. Anyone attempting to breach these would alert the occupant immediately. Can you neutralize them? Harkan asked. Not quickly. These are Aura-grade security measures, likely enhanced by the imposter's own innovations. Harkan considered their options. We need a different approach. Silverforge, how quickly can you implement a spacefold? She raised her eyebrows. A goblin mining technique? In a wizard castle? The principle is the same, Harkan insisted. Temporarily folding space between two adjacent points to bypass physical barriers. It might work, she acknowledged reluctantly. But it would drain my magic significantly. We'd need to succeed on the first attempt. Do it, Harkan decided. We fold space directly into the office, neutralize Crouch before he can respond, and secure the location. The technique required intense concentration. Silverforge placed her palms against the stone wall adjacent to the office door, her eyes closed as she sensed the magical currents flowing through the castle. Goblin spacefolding was typically used in mining operations to bypass unstable tunnel sections, but the underlying magical principles could be adapted to other situations. Slowly, the stone beneath her hands began to ripple like water. A dark seam appeared, widening gradually into an opening just large enough for a person to step through. Beyond it lay a dim view of Moody's office. Now, Silverforge whispered, strain evident in her voice. The fold won't hold long. Harkan moved first, stepping through the magical opening directly into the office. The warriors followed, weapons ready, with Sharpclaw and Ironheart coming last. As predicted, the magical alarms on the door remained undisturbed by their unconventional entry method. The office was cluttered with dark detectors and defensive instruments, many of which, Harkan noted, had been deliberately disabled. A large trunk with multiple locks stood in one corner, while a desk covered in maps and documents dominated the center of the room. And seated behind that desk, wand raised in surprise, was the man they'd come for, though his appearance was shifting even as they watched. The polyjuice potion was wearing off, revealing a younger, gaunt-faced wizard with wild eyes. Goblins, he snarled, his wand moving in a complex pattern. In Hogwarts. Before he could complete whatever spell he was casting, Harken launched a goblin-forged throwing dagger. The blade sliced through the air, striking the impostor's wand hand with precision. The wand clattered to the floor as Crouch howled in pain and rage. The goblin warriors moved with practiced efficiency, subduing the thrashing wizard and binding him with magic-suppressing restraints. Throughout the brief struggle, Harken noted that Crouch seemed more outraged by the interruption than afraid of capture, the behavior of a fanatic rather than a mere opportunist. Search everything, Harken ordered once Crouch was secure. Ironheart, check that trunk, it has containment wards around it. While his team methodically examined the office, Harken approached their captive, who glared at him with undisguised hatred. Bartemius Crouch Jr., Harken stated flatly. Supposedly dead Death Eater. What is your purpose at Hogwarts? Crouch spat at Harken's feet. Filthy goblin lover. You're no better than the mudbloods and blood traitors my master will purge when he returns. Your master needs significant help returning, Harken observed coolly. Hence your presence here. What role does the Triwizard Tournament play in his plans? A manic grin spread across Crouch's face. You're too late. The plan is already in motion. When the cup becomes a portkey, when the blood of the enemy is taken, he will rise again, more powerful than before. War King, Ironheart called urgently from the trunk. I've bypassed the wards. You need to see this. Leaving two warriors guarding Crouch, Harken moved to the trunk, which Ironheart had opened to reveal a deep pit below. At the bottom lay a man, emaciated, bound, but alive. The real Alastair Moody. Kept alive for the polyjuice, Sharpclaw deduced, examining the numerous flasks of potion arrayed nearby. And likely for information extraction. While they worked to extract the real Moody from his prison, Silverforge discovered a hidden compartment in the desk containing detailed plans for the Triwizard Tournament's final task, a massive maze filled with magical obstacles. The Triwizard Cup will be placed at the center, she read, scanning the documents. And here, notes about converting it to a portkey to transport someone to Little Hangleton Graveyard. Check for the name Riddle, Harken instructed, remembering details from Dumbledore's briefing. That was Voldemort's father's surname. Sure enough, the notes mentioned a grave marked Tom Riddle as a key component in some ritual involving Bone of the Father. A resurrection ritual, Ironheart breathed, recognizing the elements. Ancient dark magic requiring bone of the father, flesh of the servant, and blood of the enemy. Designed to create a new body for a disembodied soul. Longbottom, Harken realized. That's why Crouch entered him in the tournament despite his age, to ensure he reached the cup, was transported to this graveyard, and provided the blood of the enemy for the ritual. But why Longbottom? Silverforge questioned. If Voldemort considers you his primary enemy based on the prophecy? Because he doesn't know I'm alive, Harken concluded. Or at least, didn't when this plan was set in motion. The wizard world believed me dead until recently. Neville became the focus as the other child from the prophecy. Further searching revealed a small, cloth-wrapped bundle hidden in a warded compartment behind a false wall panel. Ironheart approached it cautiously, his lorekeeper's senses extended. Powerful dark magic, he reported grimly. Unlike anything I've encountered before. Don't touch it, Harken ordered. Is it a Horcrux? No, Ironheart replied after further magical analysis. But it contains a soul fragment, not anchored to the object itself but existing within it temporarily. I believe this may be Voldemort's current form. A homunculus of some kind, waiting for the resurrection ritual. The implications were staggering. They had not only captured Voldemort's agent but potentially Voldemort himself in whatever diminished form he currently occupied. We need Dumbledore, Harken decided, realizing the situation had escalated beyond their original mission parameters. Silverforge used the communication mirror to alert Ragnarok. This is no longer just an investigation, were preventing Voldemort's imminent return. As Silverforge contacted Gringotts, Harken approached Crouch once more. The Death Eater had been watching their discoveries with growing alarm, his earlier bravado replaced by calculating silence. "Your master's plan has failed," Harken told him flatly. "Cooperate now, and your treatment may improve marginally." Crouch's eyes darted between Harken and the bundle his team had discovered. "You don't understand what you're interfering with," he hissed. "He cannot be stopped. He has taken precautions you cannot imagine." "The Horcruxes?" Harken asked bluntly, watching Crouch's expression shift from surprise to renewed defiance. "Yes, we know about those too. Your master's secrets are unraveling, Crouch. His return will not happen as planned." Before Crouch could respond, the office door burst open. Dumbledore stood in the entrance, wand drawn, with Professors McGonagall and Snape close behind him. "I see you've been busy, War King," Dumbledore observed, taking in the scene with remarkable composure. "Though I believe our agreement included keeping me informed before taking action." The situation accelerated unexpectedly, Harken replied, unfazed by the mild rebuke. "We've captured Crouch Jr., rescued the real Moody, and discovered what appears to be Voldemort himself in temporary form." He gestured toward the wrapped bundle, which Ironheart had placed within a containment field. Dumbledore approached the bundle cautiously, his expression grave as he performed his own magical assessment. "You are correct," he confirmed quietly. "This appears to be a rudimentary body created through dark magic, containing what remains of Voldemort's unbounded soul." Professor McGonagall gasped, while Snape's already pale face seemed to lose what little color it possessed. "There's more," Harken continued. "Crouch was planning to use the Triwizard Cup as a portkey to transport Neville Longbottom to a graveyard for a resurrection ritual. The final task would have completed Voldemort's return to full power." Dumbledore's eyes showed genuine alarm. "Then we owe you a significant debt, Harken. Your intervention has prevented a catastrophe." "The question remains," Snape interjected, his cold gaze fixed on the bundle, "what to do with this. Conventional magical containment may not be sufficient for the Dark Lord, even in this diminished state. Goblin containment would be more secure," Harken suggested. "Our deepest vaults have held dark artifacts for centuries without incident. I'm afraid the Ministry would never permit Voldemort, in any form, to be removed from wizard jurisdiction," Dumbledore replied with evident regret. "Though I agree Goblin methods might be more effective." Discussions about jurisdiction were interrupted by a sudden, piercing alarm from the magical instruments Sharpclaw had set up. The bundle containing Voldemort's form had begun to emit a black mist, which swirled against the containment field with increasing pressure. "He's attempting to escape," Ironheart warned. "The homunculus form is being abandoned, he's trying to flee as pure spirit." Dumbledore moved swiftly, casting additional containment charms around the goblin wards. "We must act quickly. If his spirit escapes, he'll seek another host or temporary form, and our advantage will be lost." "Can he be destroyed in this state?" Harken asked urgently. "Not permanently," Dumbledore replied, strain evident in his voice as he maintained the containment spells. "Not while his Horcruxes exist. But we can force him into a binding that will prevent his escape or resurrection for some time." The black mist pressed harder against the combined wizard and goblin containment, small tendrils occasionally breaking through before being forced back. The magical pressure in the room built to uncomfortable levels, making it difficult to breathe or think clearly. "I need the stone," Dumbledore said suddenly, his eyes meeting Harken's. "The Philosopher's Stone. It can be used not only to create life but to bind it, to force a soul into permanent connection with a prepared vessel." "You said you'd moved it from Hogwarts," Harken reminded him. "And I did. To a place only I can access." Dumbledore reached into his robes and withdrew a small, ruby-red crystal that pulsed with inner light. "Nicholas entrusted it to me completely after the last attempt to steal it." Understanding dawned on Harken. "You want to bind Voldemort's soul fragment to the stone? Trap him inside it?" "Precisely," Dumbledore confirmed. The stone's alchemical properties make it an ideal prison for a disembodied soul. Once bound, it can be kept in a location even more secure than Gringotts. The Department of Mysteries, Snape suggested. The Soul Chamber. Dumbledore nodded. With both Goblin and Wizard wards to ensure it remains undisturbed until all Horcruxes are located and destroyed. The plan was risky but offered the best chance of containing Voldemort long-term. Harken signaled his team to support Dumbledore's efforts, with Goblin and Wizard magic working in rare harmony toward a common goal. What followed was one of the most complex magical operations Harken had ever participated in. Goblin earth magic anchored the containment field, while Dumbledore used the stone to create a metaphysical vacuum that pulled at Voldemort's essence. Snape contributed potions expertise, brewing a fixative agent that would help bind the soul to the stone permanently. The struggle lasted hours, draining both Wizard and Goblin participants to the point of exhaustion. Voldemort's soul fragment fought with desperate intensity, attempting repeatedly to break free or possess one of those present. When the binding finally succeeded near dawn, the stone had changed, darkening from ruby red to a deep, clouded crimson, with what appeared to be black lightning occasionally visible deep within its structure. "It is done," Dumbledore announced, his voice hoarse from the extended magical exertion. "Voldemort is contained, though not destroyed. The stone will need to be secured immediately." A joint operation, Harken suggested, equally exhausted but determined to see the matter through. Goblin and Wizard security measures working in tandem. Something neither side could breach alone. Dumbledore studied him with newfound respect. "You continue to surprise me, Harken. Most would see this as an opportunity to claim jurisdiction, not propose cooperation." "I serve the Goblin nation," Harken replied simply. "But I'm not blind to the fact that some threats transcend our usual boundaries. Voldemort is an enemy to all magical beings, not just wizards." While arrangements were made for the stone's transfer to the Department of Mysteries under heavy guard, Harken contacted Ragnarok with a full report. The director was skeptical about the joint security proposal but recognized its strategic value in establishing new precedent for Goblin-Wizard cooperation. "The council is divided," Ragnarok informed him via the communication mirror. "Some see this as a diplomatic victory, others as unnecessary entanglement in wizard affairs. Gornik's faction is particularly vocal about the risks of setting such a precedent. Tell Gornik that containing Voldemort serves Goblin interests directly," Harken replied. "During his previous rise to power, dozens of our kind died. Would he prefer we step aside and allow wizard supremacists another opportunity to target our nation? The political implications would need to be managed carefully, but Harken was confident the successful mission would ultimately strengthen his position as War King. By preventing Voldemort's return while establishing new protocols for Goblin-Wizard cooperation, he had demonstrated precisely the kind of bridge-building role the position was designed for. As sunrise bathed Hogwarts in golden light, Harken stood with Dumbledore on the astronomy tower, watching ministry officials and Goblin representatives secure the stone for transport. "What happens now?" Dumbledore asked quietly. "Will you return to Gringotts and your duties as War King? Or might you consider remaining at Hogwarts for a time? There is much you could learn here, and much you could teach, I suspect." The question touched on the very duality Harken had been contemplating since his public reappearance in the wizard world. His position as War King was secure, his value to the Goblin nation proven. But he could no longer ignore the wizard half of his heritage, the magic, the history, the connections that had been denied him for 8 years. "My place is with the Goblin nation," Harken replied firmly. "But perhaps not exclusively. There may be arrangements that would allow me to explore both aspects of my heritage." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "I believe such arrangements could be made. A special student status, perhaps. Or a cultural exchange program between Hogwarts and Gringotts, something that hasn't existed for centuries but could benefit both societies enormously." "I would need to consult with the council," Harken cautioned. "And any such arrangement would need to respect my position and responsibilities." "Of course," Dumbledore agreed readily. But consider this, the prophecy speaks of you having power the Dark Lord knows not. Perhaps that power isn't simply your goblin training or your wizard heritage, but your unique ability to stand between worlds, to draw from both traditions in ways no one else can. Harkan had considered this possibility himself. His performance during the ritual of iron and stone had demonstrated an unusual capacity to integrate different magical traditions, finding harmony where others saw only opposition. "I'll consider it," he promised, not committing further until he'd consulted with Ragnak and his advisors. As they descended from the tower, they encountered Neville, Ron, and Hermione waiting anxiously in the corridor below. News of the night's events had clearly reached them, though the full details remained confidential. "Is it true?" Neville asked urgently. "You know who was here?" "In the castle." "The situation is under control," Dumbledore assured them. "Thanks in large part to War King Harkan and his team." The three students looked at Harkan with undisguised awe, particularly Neville, who seemed to be processing the implications of a danger he'd sensed but not fully understood. "Thank you," he said simply to Harkan. "For believing me when most adults wouldn't." "Sometimes the youngest eyes see most clearly," Harkan replied, unconsciously echoing a goblin proverb Razorclaw had often repeated to him. "You showed courage in seeking help despite resistance." As Dumbledore led the students away, promising a more complete explanation when security concerns permitted, Silverforge joined Harkan in the corridor. "The team is prepared to depart," she reported. "Ragnak expects a full briefing by midday." Harkan nodded, then hesitated. "What would you think of a more formal exchange program between Gringotts and Hogwarts? Educational, perhaps even diplomatic in nature." She studied him carefully. "I'd think you're considering splitting your time between worlds." "Not splitting," he corrected. "Bridging. There's a difference." "And the Goblin Nation? Your duties as War King? The Council already questions your priorities after this mission." "I would never abandon those responsibilities," Harkan assured her. "But perhaps the War King's role needs to evolve for these changing times. The old conflicts between wizards and goblins serve neither society, especially with threats like Voldemort looming." Silverforge didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded slowly. "The ancient texts describe a time when goblin and wizard magic worked in harmony rather than opposition. What we did tonight, combining our approaches to contain the Dark Lord, would have been impossible for either side alone." "Exactly," Harkan agreed. "There's potential in cooperation that centuries of mutual suspicion have obscured." As they prepared to leave Hogwarts, Harkan took a final look at the ancient castle that might have been his school in another life. Instead of regret, he felt a growing sense of possibility. The boy who lived and the Goblin War King were no longer separate identities at war within him but complementary aspects of a unique position he alone could fill. The wizarding world had abandoned Harry Potter, only to find him transformed into something unprecedented, a human raised in goblin traditions, with loyalties and abilities that defied conventional categories. Their shock and uncertainty at his return represented an opportunity to reshape the relationship between their societies, potentially for the better. Similarly, the Goblin Nation's initial resistance to his human heritage had gradually transformed into recognition of the strategic advantage his dual nature provided. Even Gornik, his most consistent critic, had been forced to acknowledge the value of having a War King who could navigate both worlds effectively. Harkan Potter, both Goblin Champion and Wizard-born, had finally found his purpose. Not as a pawn of prophecy or a weapon for either society to wield against the other, but as a bridge between worlds that had remained separate for too long. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Prejudices on both sides ran deep, reinforced by centuries of mistrust and conflict. The Ministry would continue pushing for greater control, while conservative elements in Goblin society would resist change. Voldemort's supporters remained at large, and the contained Dark Lord himself was merely imprisoned, not destroyed. But for the first time since being abandoned on Gringotts Steps 8 years earlier, Harkan felt truly whole, no longer caught between identities but embracing the unique strength that came from standing between worlds. As he led his team back toward the goblin tunnels that would return them to Gringotts, Harkin's mind was already turning to the challenges ahead, convincing the council to support expanded cooperation with select wizard allies, continuing the hunt for Voldemort's Horcruxes, establishing new protocols for joint security operations. The War King had work to do, not just for the Goblin nation, but for all magical beings threatened by the darkness that had nearly returned. And Harry Potter, the boy who had been abandoned but found a home and purpose beyond anything Dumbledore could have imagined, would face that darkness not as a wizard hero of prophecy, but as something far more powerful, a leader forged between worlds, belonging fully to both and neither, determined to build bridges where others saw only walls. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.